So here we go. So he says as follows: My brothers, remember my brothers. He's talking about his readers. In addition to what I've written above, I know that we're obligated to unite all of Klal Yisrael by way of this mitzvah of the coming. This is about Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, because of our age-old debt was loaded upon us at the inception of our nation. We were exiled. We have suffered harsh oppression for thousands of years, and we've been wept profusely while dwelling on foreign soil, all in order to pay off the debt. And he's going to explain to us. In other words, the reason that we were punished is we have a debt to pay to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's the debt? He's going to try to give it to us in the next piece and then work out how it works. Makes sense. This goes back to the sin of the spies. The entire congregation lifted up their voice, and the people wept all night. And says the Medrash as follows: the meaning. This is the meaning of the verse. The words of the talebearer, the words of the are like the blows in Mishlei. And Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Yosef Glili, says the words of the talebearer are kemislachamim, kameit lahem, as if they had a relative had died. So too, when the spies returned from spying out of the land, they spread themselves out among all the tribes of Israel. So each one went to his respective tribe. This is a medrash about what happens when the Meraglim came back. They went to his tribe and threw himself down in every corner of his house. His sons and daughters came to him and said, "What happened, my master? Why are you so distraught?" Then while standing up, he pretended to fall down again, and he said, they all kind of worked out this scenario, and he said, "Woe unto me because of you, my sons and daughters-in-law. Or how the Amorites will mock and rule over you. Who will be able to look after you? I know what I saw." And all at once the sons, daughters, and daughters-in-law broke out in tears until the neighbors heard what had happened, and they too began to cry. One family heard from the next, and the entire tribe was crying. Each of the spies did the same and caused his tribe to weep. And finally all 600,000 Jews became one group, and they cried bitterly, lifting their voices heavenward. How do we know this? Where do we derive this? In the verse, the entire congregation lifted up their voice. So in other words, the spies, according to this medrash, once again, it's not Torah. It's based upon a pasuk in Mishlei. The spies created a sense of this depression that everybody. Right. Another explanation when it says Vatisad kolam, they lifted up their voice. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to them, "You took a bad loan." Vatisad is from Tosher. Tuf Shin Hey is to borrow, and Tuf Shin Aleph is to raise. So God said, Vatisah is you lifted, or not you lifted up your voice, but you took a loan that was a bad loan, and by your lives you will have to pay for this. In other words, you took a bad loan by crying out to me not to go into Eretz Yisrael. You have to pay this down. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, "You wept in vain. I'll establish for you weeping all generations." At that moment it was decreed that the temple would be destroyed, the Jews would be exiled among nations of the world, which takes place on the same day or the same night the spies came back, on Tish B'Av. And thus it says, they despised the desirable land, therefore He lifted up, He saw His hand, He lifted up His hand against them, a lifting of the hand parable to a lifting of the voice.
I understand why compare that to in the Midbar? Why compare what happened in the Meraglim?
What do you mean? Why compare what to what happened in Meraglim?
With the story of going to Israel.
Why are we comparing what? That we go exile?
What's the connection to going to Israel?
No, why he putting it out? We're talking about why before was talking about the Jewish didn't come to Israel because they were in the Galut. Now you bring what happened in the desert.
It's a new piece. He's going to explain to you why he's bringing this down. He's trying for a different approach.
They didn't want to go to Israel.
Right. So the key that he's going to be focusing on is the second paragraph of the indented paragraph, where it says another explanation. Lift up. It says Vatisad kolam. They lifted up their voice. So the play on words is they lifted up Vatisha, that they took a loan. They took a bad loan. Sometimes you take a bad loan, or maybe I guess you lend out a bad loan. You got to work it down to pay it off. So therefore, you have to pay down the loan itself. Thus the spies who were the leaders of Israel abused and betrayed the trust that Klal Yisrael gave them. The entire nation trusted them and sent them to spy out the lands in order to discover the most effective way to enter, conquer, and settle their forefathers' land. This explains why Moshe reproved them when it says, "And the Lord sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, Alu Rishus Haaretz, go up and possess the land that I gave to you." That is to say, the whole purpose of sending the spies was not to go up and possess the land, but Vatamru et Pi Hashem Elokechem, you rebelled against the words of the Lord your God. So this is about the spies. Let's just finish this letter, okay? Notice, my brothers, that the spies, page 201, the spies use the same modern technique that people use today when they want to capture the hearts of the masses. It's called propaganda. The spies use this technique so extensively that each prince enters his house and pretend to fall. Is there any greater propaganda than this? Even nowadays, you will have a hard time finding anything like it. They will make, the drama queen, so to speak, or drama king. They achieved their goal because they did not spare the trouble of entering the house of each of 600,000 Jews and scaring the family members until each entire congregation as one broke down and cried bitterly. Thus Israel said, our brethren have melted our hearts, Achenu himasus lovenu, by murmuring in each person's tent. This also explained Moshe's statement, you murmured in your tents. And similarly, David HaMelech said they despised the desirable land and murmured in the tents. To teach, they succeeded in making the desirable land despicable in the eyes of the entire congregation, immersing in everyone's tent. Yes, comment.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Enough. This is so fundamentally attached. It's not funny. Why? Just remember something. This all happened because the nation didn't trust in Hashem to deliver them. And they said, we want spies in there. We don't trust it'll be good. We're scared. And who are the spies today? In Galut. The spies are the country we are in. We have no trust in Hashem that none of us are moving back to Israel. We have a land now, and none of us are moving. Some are moving back, but most aren't. It's the same thing. It's the same dynamic. Moshe?
Right. I agree. So he's saying, and how do you undo it? You got to turn around with propaganda. In other words, people think negative, they thought negatively. How are you going to do it? You got to think positively. You spoke against the land, now you got to speak for the land. So that's what he's trying to say. This is what the age-old debt is. There was a debt put in place because we did not appreciate, or we kind of said bad things about the land. That's the debt we have to work down. How do you work down the debt? You got to say good things about the land. You got to balance out the scales. That's really what the analogy is going to be about here. I'm not sure if I'm saying directly what you're saying, but I think I'm close enough. So in other words, it's a different way to talk about the importance of going to spread the reason that we should go back to Eretz Yisrael. And he's talked to use it from the point of view of propaganda. People use propaganda to knock things down, so you got to use the propaganda to turn things up.
Yeah.
So therefore, this is all about trying to rebuild and resettle the land. Now my brothers contemplated and noticed that they did not hesitate to use various deceptive and shrewd methods, and they spared no trouble to mislead the entire nation and arouse them to detest the desirable land. Their intense propaganda helped them achieve all of this and enabled them to unite the entire nation against our desirable land. These princes and leaders of the congregation did all of this for their own selfish goals. As you quote above, they caused the bitter affliction that we suffered these past 2,000 years and that we continue to suffer to this very day. We see no end to our exile. On the contrary, intensifies day by day, culminating in our current predicament. This all happened, and here's the chap here, this part, this book. This all happened because of the bad loan we took then, as the Medrash terms the sin of the spies. God said, by your lives, b'chayechem, you will eventually pay for this. We've yet to pay up this debt. Therefore, we must endure all the afflictions that befall us. Furthermore, says Em HaBanim, Israel left a bad debt to the future generations with the crying of theirs. Thus, as long as this debt is not paid off, we cannot expect any improvement in our situation. So what's going to be the way to pay off the debt? Talk about going to Eretz Yisrael. The debt was because we said we're not going to go to Eretz Yisrael. When we said we're not going to go to Eretz Yisrael, God says, therefore you won't go. If you do go, you get thrown out and you'll suffer. What's the best way to do this to upend it? So how do we change things? How do we turn it around? So he says, first he talks about Shavuos. On Shavuos, the Magen Avraham, Sefer Magen Avraham says that we stay awake on the night of Shavuos in order to rectify the sin that our ancestors committed by sleeping through the night prior to the giving of Torah. Do people know this? One of the reasons we stay up all night Shavuos because the Jewish people slept in.
Yeah.
It's a tikkun for that.
Right, it's a tikkun.
Yep.
It's called tikkun leil Shavuos. What are we being misakein? The fact that we were supposed to be ready to get the Torah, and guess what happened?
Yes.
We blew it, okay? So therefore, to upend that, to kind of change that and make up for it, we, for all generations, get up early. It's at least one of the reasons for it. If our rabbis introduced a custom to rectify such a minor infraction, we did not get the Torah, we just were late. Like, we're late for my appointment, 5 minutes. Okay, so I'm here. Don't make such a big deal. Then we must certainly... Right? Do you ever have that when you go to a doctor? Or say someone else, I'm here, I'm just 5 minutes late. And the doctor says, but I'm behind him. Okay, how long do you wait for him? Okay. So then we must certainly rectify a major infraction like the sin of spies. Our entire existence and honor depends on this, as does the honor of Hashem, our holy Torah, the Davidic dynasty, Mashiach ben David, our holy land. Therefore, it is clear as day to anyone who wants to admit the truth that the only way to free ourselves from the horrible predicament in which we have to close for 2,000 years to rectify and pay off the bad debt which we've incurred it long ago. Then when we tear up this bill of debt, we will leave this bitter exile with an uplifted hand. So we have to kind of rip up the debt in order. Then we can leave the exile. How do you rip up the debt? Talk positively about Eretz Yisrael. Then we'll be able to dwell honorably in our land, and children will return to their home, their borders, etc., etc. Now, on the night of Shavuos, we rectify our sin by fulfilling now what we should have been done then. We should have stayed awake all night, preparing ourselves with bridal ornaments for the designated day when God would enter into a new covenant with the Almighty, with the assembly of Israel under the canopy of Mount Sinai. Since we were remiss back then, we make up for it now each and every year. Similarly, in order to rectify the sin of the spies which caused us this bad debt, for which we pay for every until this day, we must fulfill what was lacking then. When we do this, our debt will be paid off, our bill of debt will be torn up, and we'll be able to achieve a goal, and so forth and so on. How do you do that? As I already mentioned, the angel, the holy volume, Magid Meisharim, this is the sefer that it talks about how the angel speaks to the Beit Yosef, speaks from Yosef Cairo. There's a lot of discussions that go on there. The Magid is the speaker, who is the angel that's speaking, tells the Beit Yosef that Moshe Rabbeinu sent the spies expecting they would return and extol Eretz Yisrael and its special qualities. This would arouse within the hearts of Israel a burning desire to enter the land as soon as possible. Why were they sent? What did we need them for? It was to kind of enthrall us, to kind of raise our excitement. This desire would make the Jews worthy of inheriting the land, even though they were not worthy of their own merit, because they were not perfect. However, because of selfish motives, the spies did exactly the opposite. Why were they selfish? They didn't want to lose their jobs being leaders of Israel.
Good job for them.
I don't know if I would agree. How do we know Moshe expected them to return positively? Maybe Moshe knew that this was just the right move to do.
Maybe. But he's quoting the Sefer, which was written by Rav Yosef Cairo, who suggests that this was done to raise the spirit of the Jewish people. You're right. You would not know this. You could disagree with this. There's no proof. I can't prove it. The Torah can't prove it for you. But the logic is based upon being what is said here.
I only say that because the other Moshe was too bright and perceptive an individual to not notice.
No, he says to the people, you want shlach l'chan Hashem. You want people, God says, and you send them. Yeah, maybe.
I'm saying Moshe expected positive things to come from this?
I don't know. Anyways, you could argue.
I think the wrong was that because when they came, they give the report to the people, not to Moshe. It's a big wrong. When they come back, who gives supposed to be the who sent them? Moshe.
So,
supposed to be. They mean to go to everybody. If you say only Moshe and say, you know what, you be quiet, I take care of it.
So,
you got to come back to the boss.
there's
This
room,
was exactly wrong.
right,
Yes.
there's room for a larger discussion about the leadership capacity of Moshe Rabbeinu, the leadership abilities of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was probably not the best leader in the world. What makes Moshe the leader is really he's a communicator to Hashem. He's the tzidor, he's the pipe. He's the fiber optic cable up to the Almighty. The Almighty communicates through him. If Moshe had been the charismatic leader who people would follow on this, the snap of a finger, then people would say that we simply were a cult. We're following Moshe. So we're not a Moshe cult. We're simply the followers of Hashem, who Moshe is really bringing the communication to us. But Moshe as a leader is not such a good leader. He's only every time he's in trouble, he says, "God help me out."
Can you blame him?
I can't blame him. I'm saying, but
Look what he's doing.
well, Moshe didn't want to do this job in the first place. He was coerced into it. He was talked into it. And Moshe, Hashem says, "I need you to do it." Moshe says, "I'm not an ish devarim. I'm not a speaker. I don't have that capacity. I ran away from Egypt. I ran away from these leadership opportunities." So all I'm saying is, did Moshe really understand this was a bad thing to happen? I don't know.
But if Moshe was any doubt to come in the negative report, I don't think he would send them.
I don't know. Lo yodea.
There were lots of other reasons to go to look at the country,
to see it.
Said the fruit was large, and the people were large.
So why did they have to see that?
They were giants.
When God says we're going to do this, God says the sea split in half. You're going to walk in the sea. They walk. God says here's the Ten Commandments.
So why did they have to do it? Okay.
What did they need? What was the purpose of sending spies? Not just simply beginning. Now, I think you may be saying, Harold, that it was good to spy out the land to know where the strengths and weaknesses were. Anytime you want to get into a country, you want to send a fifth column ahead of you to know to spy out what's going on, to figure out where the weak points are. But not really to see that it was great fruit.
But Moshe, to Harold's point, when Samuel was told to anoint David, he's rewarded for asking Hashem for saying to Hashem, I'm scared I'll be killed, what do I do? And then Hashem helps him out.
Yes.
Isn't it the same thing here with sending spies to a land they didn't know? Hashem says, go into the land. What's the difference from Samuel asking Hashem or fearing for his life to Hashem? What's the difference for the people going into this land where they're potentially going to be murdered?
So I'm going to rephrase the question in a different question, because Jew answers one question with another question. Whose idea was it to send the spies?
The people.
The people, right. And that's how it says it clearly in Sefer Dvarim. We want to send the spies. So it comes from the people. It comes from the rabble mob. It comes from the people who says, we want to see what's going on.
So they weren't looking for anything positive then?
So they either that, or they were kind of wishy-washy, or they were actually beginning to question.
But to my point, that's the same thing with Samuel as an individual.
But they weren't all saying...
anoint David. It's Samuel who says, well, I need to do this to save my life against Saul.
So therefore...
Against, Saul.
Yes. Therefore,
what's the difference? It's a collective that's saying we need to save our lives. We've got to send somebody there.
Okay.
We may be killed.
So it's not bad to send the spies.
Right.
It's not necessarily bad. The question is, what was the mission of this? Question is, first of all, whose mission was it? Whose idea was it? Second of all, God's idea, or did God simply agree to it? If this was the people's idea and it was a bad idea, then why did God sign up to it? Because God lets them send it. And then the next question is, what's the purpose of sending the spies? Is it a military mission? It does not appear to be a military mission. It appears to be some kind of souvenir collection. I mean, they look for where there are strong points and weak points, and they come back and tell the people, it's such a strong country, you're never going to get in there, but they're bringing back this wonderful fruit. Who cares?
But the 30,000-foot view here is that they lacked in bitachon.
Yes.
Okay, that's the So Samuel was told to do his job and anoint.
So therefore, if things had gone according to Hoyle, the spies would have gone. They would have come back with a good report. They would have said, "Yes, it's going to be difficult, but we can do it." And you weren't quite sure. Now that you know you can do it, let's all go. And people would go, "Rah, rah, rah! Let's go! Come on, we're going to beat those Canaanites! Come on!" They get riled up. That's not what happened. They could have been very good.
Yeah,
it could have been very good. You see things in reality. You say, okay, we know this is a tough area to go. We're going to have to put more troops, and this area is going to be easier to go. But let's go. God says we can do it. And that's what Joshua says.
So why punish the entire people?
That's what Kalev says.
Why punish the entire people? That's what I'm trying to get at.
Unfortunately, entire people follow.
That's what I'm trying to get at, Moshe. Why are all the generations punished?
Because when the 10 spies came, because exactly why he brings the measure, 10 spies came back and everybody started crying. They were the propagandists. If you believe in the propaganda, if you believe Nazi propaganda, you become a Nazi, you're a Nazi. Shouldn't say that. I don't like calling a Jew a Nazi. But if you believe evil propaganda, you become enamored with that, you become part of that group. You can't say, it's someone made me read it. No. So the fact that everyone believed that according to this medrash, once again, this medrash, that they all went around to different houses and everybody said, we're never going to do it. Everybody said we can't do it. It wasn't like a small group. It looks like everybody said we can't do it.
Where was the malicious intent? You have the people who were lacking in bitachon.
So the answer is, it's not malicious intent necessarily. It means they were not able to make that kind of transition. That's exactly. They didn't die at that point.
I know, but we've been suffering ever since.
Correct. Yeah. It's because everything we do has an implication somewhere else. Okay, back in the ranch. So therefore, where are we up to? So therefore, where am I up to?
As I already mentioned.
Where's the...
Halfway down.
I'm on the wrong page, thank you, okay. As I already mentioned, the angel, I was on the wrong page, 202, the second last paragraph. The holy volume of Em HaBanim Chap3, Moshe Yeres said, the spies expect they return and extol their special qualities. They would arouse within the hearts of Israel burning desire to enter the land as soon as possible. This desire would make the Jews worthy of inheriting the land, even though they were not worthy of it on their own merit. However, because of their selfish motives, the spies did exactly the opposite. Using various methods and spending much effort, they caused the nation to abhor Eretz Yisrael, as I explained above. Thus, if we want to rectify this sin, if we want to pay off the debt, if we want to upend this, we must try to arouse the children of Israel, wherever they may be, to love and desire the desirable land of our forefathers, as opposed to the people who he's dealing with who said, we can't go to Israel, we have to wait for Mashiach, we can't make the choice now. Then a fire will burn within them to come and inherit the Holy Land, and they will desire it more than anything in the world. This will be the complete rectification of the great sin mentioned above. So this is a completely different topic about listening in Israel. It's about trying to undo the sin of the Meraglim. In this way, we'll pay off the ancient debt, which we incurred at the inception of our nation, the depth which caused us to this very day such diverse and frequent troubles that we have practically perished, God forbid. When we complete this rectification, our bill of debt will be torn up. The day of salvation will arrive with great wonders and grandeur. This is the day for which we have waited. Let's exult and rejoice in our His salvation. Speaking on days, Amen. However, my brother, this is page 203. You must be aware that what Chazal say in the Medrash, the righteous people rectify their sins in the same manner that they commit them. Therefore, we must inspire the hearts of Israel and kindle within them the fire of desire for Eretz Yisrael, using the same methods that our ancestors did to undermine Israel's desire for the land. The generation of the spies united the entire congregation against Eretz Yisrael and put a great deal of effort into propaganda. They established an entire propaganda organization, which we would call today a propaganda department, that organized people to convince others to oppose Eretz Yisrael. Similarly, we must establish a propaganda apparatus that would permeate every Jewish home and try to convince every Jewish soul to support Eretz Yisrael. With God's help, if we do so, we'll succeed in uniting all of Klal Yisrael behind Eretz Yisrael. Then the bad debt will be paid off, the bill will be torn up, the sin will be rectified, and the prosecutor will withdraw. The defender will grow strong, the day of salvation will arrive, etc., 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 etc. So in other words, what's he talking about now? Even if you don't really like this, you got to work hard on getting people to come to Eretz Yisrael, to convince them, and then it's going to work. So it's a very different kind of approach. Okay.
It's sort of like today with all the internet and everything pumping all this negative information.
Yeah.
People will look at Israel and say, look at, I don't want to go there. Look at all this bombing. Look at all these killings. Look at the assassins.
So the answer is yes. That's why Israel has to do good hasbara. Yes, they have to do good.
But they do. But the thing is that still, a picture is worth 1,000 words,
But people are also finding out that they this is the hand of fate. They move somewhere else, and they're in a terrorist attack where they moved to.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
The things are kind of going both ways. You have a president of the United States who talks about that Israel now owns the Golan, which never happened before. You have a president of the United States who's moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Okay, which they're very concerned when that anniversary happens of the moving of the embassy. It's about to come up soon.
But this president may move it to Tel Aviv or to Jerusalem, and the next president may say move it back to Uganda.
So no, he can't, because actually he cannot move the embassy anymore, because the Congress had declared the embassy was going to move.
Oh.
Congress had made this decision. They had passed that the embassy should move to Jerusalem. There was an exclusion unless the president signs a deferral. And every president signed a deferral that this is not yet the time to do it. We're going to do it, but we're not doing it. This president did it, so it's in conformity with the laws, actually.
Very good.
It's a funny kind of situation. This
Trudeau, before Trudeau, what's his name?
Harper.
Harper? No, before Harper. Before.
I don't know.
Richard?
Before Christian. In the
Campbell.
70s.
Trudeau?
Clark.
Joe Clark?
Yeah. From his after 6 months he disappeared from unbelievable.
This okay.
And then Kim Campbell took over.
They had Kim Campbell. Yep.
Yeah, for a couple of weeks.
Okay, Samach Dalet. This is middle of 203. Where are we up to? So I'm almost at the end of this page. I have another.
Samach Dalet.
Yes, Samach Dalet. Back in the ranch. Focusing, guys. Beit Rebbe. There's a book about the Balatanya. Balatanya is, of course, the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitch, the first Chabad Rebbe. Recounts various lessons that the Rebbe learned from the war between Napoleon and Russia, which he lived through. We must learn from today's war. He's talking about the war, the Second World War he's writing about. The two warring kingdoms have established propaganda departments whose sole purpose is to promulgate their doctrine and capture the hearts of the masses. Similarly, like the Stürmer was a tremendous propaganda. The Stürmer, the paper that the Nazis published.
The German equivalent of the New York Times.
Well, the New York, that's what people, cartoons
I'm sure they would not ever like that. New York Times.
It was a terrible cartoon. Terrible. Similarly, we must appoint, yes, two of them. Similarly, we must appoint great men blessed with true wisdom and abounding insight, imbued with fear of God and talent, to convince the masses of the importance of the sacred and lofty ideal. These men must be able to enlighten the holy nation of their obligation of settling Eretz Yisrael, and arouse with them the desire to elevate the pride of the land and raise it from the us. We have to go out and convince ourselves about the importance of going to Israel, is what he's saying. Tana the Elio also states we're permitted to learn this kind of lesson from Gentile practices. In other words, how can I learn from the non-Jews? It's a goyish Welt. The Medrash explains that Elkanah instructed the Jews to ascend to Shiloh for the festivals en masse, and with great enthusiasm in order to fulfill the verse, a multitude of people is the king's glory. He also said to them, learn the way of worship. I have another page when we're at the end in a moment. Learn the way of worship from the Canaanites and the idolatrous nations. They created an orderly system of worship of their gods, even though their gods are vanities and nothing else. Certainly then you must worship Hashem in an orderly fashion and ascend the Ark of the Covenant. 1 second. Sorry, I can't do too many pages at once. It gets caught in the stapler. Okay. Here's your next fix. Okay. There you go. Here's the next piece here. You can keep the old one if you want. I just don't want to confuse them together, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want another one?
These are the old ones. The new ones are going well.
These are the old ones.
Yeah, I don't mind the old ones.
You have a new one?
Yeah. 204.
This is the old one here.
There's
204, new one.
There's the old ones?
New ones.
They're not coming up.
New ones.
Uh-oh. 204 starts here. Here we go.
You got lots of them. Everybody's got it.
What
This
is
is the old one.
204?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
204. That's the new one. Anybody want one of these?
You want an old one? I just need to hear. I'm confused. Okay, good. Okay, so in other words, what we're talking about, they wanted them to come up to Shiloh to ascend to the Ark of the Covenant. For Hashem is a living God, blessed be His name forever and ever. And Elkanah told them to kind of go up with him in order to publicize the matter. He's trying to give you an analogy about how important it is to publicize the news. So all the people, Elkanah wanted them all to go, says the Medrash, to Shiloh. And he instructed all the Jews to go together. In order to publicize the matter, they lodged in the main square of each city in which they passed. As they went to Shiloh to come for the Yomim, the Shalosh Regalim, the 3 pilgrimage festivals, they stopped in each town. And they made it their business not to take the express route. They stopped every day in a different place. The Medrash describes at length how Elkanah persuaded Israel to ascend with him. Elkanah, this is the father of Shmuel, to come with him en masse and joyfully in order to glorify the King of the universe. This is a
Because it was
Medrash.
very nice voice.
Yeah, Hashem was grateful for this and rewarded him with Shmuel, the prophet, as a son. And Tanakh Belial concludes, from here you see that Shmuel was a reward for Elkanah's deed. Thus Elkanah learned from the Gentiles how to utilize the organization and propaganda for sacred manners.
You know where we see this? Yitro and Moshe.
Yes.
He learned from a Gentile
How to set up a court system, right. Correct. But he's using this example more than the Yitro story because he wants to show how important it is to spread the news. So in other words, Yitro, Elkanah is talking about how making people aware and get riled up and excited, rather positively excited to come to the Mishkan in Shiloh. So he's using this based upon what he saw other people do as well. Yes, Stefano.
We're talking about he published Elkanah. Let's go back to the desert when he said, how 600 people? Is Moshe said something, how 600 people know?
Because Moshe told the Zakanim and the Zakanim told the people.
So how did it take until there? This take 1 day.
Okay, it took 1 day.
The morning day.
Why?
600 people know what. You know what it means?
What does it mean? It means I have a whole system of teachers to teachers to teachers. It takes 1 day.
Not only that, something.
Depends how much I'm teaching.
It changed the world.
Okay, it'll take some time. Okay.
Can I just
what you're saying is that
Elkanah is the father of Samuel.
Samuel the prophet.
It starts off brown and it ends up
Unfortunately, this happened exactly during Beit Rishon when the Nevi'im, the Yirmiyahu says something. Okay. And the Yirmiyahu was going to give the bad news, and he said, I was a proof.
Right.
The Nevi Sheker go to another city, say, no, you have to do, everything is okay. The proof, you see, the proof that Yirmiyahu give, he wasn't doing. So you're okay, you don't need to do nothing, you're doing okay.
Okay, so I'm not sure that really applies here. This is more about trying to spread everything as best as we can. We can't get to every corner. Propaganda doesn't reach everybody, but if you reach enough people begin to believe it, it has an effect.
Yeah.
Right?
Boy, does it apply today, doesn't it?
It sure does.
We so need that machine.
Right. I agree.
More than ever.
Right. And the key to this medrash, and maybe you can't see it because we flipped the packets, is this medrash started by saying, learn the way of worship from the Canaanites and the idolatrous nations. Learn how to worship them from the nations. They have an orderly system of worship for their God, even though the gods are worthless. Elkanah learned from the Canaanites, the local indigenous people, that they were organized and Murgan and set and had a formalization. So every time he went to Mishkan, he stopped off in different cities to organize the people to come with him.
Right.
How did he learn that? He learned it from the non-Jews. So what's the sushta? What's the comparison here? So what Rav Tachlis is going to say is, therefore, propaganda is not about worshiping idols. Propaganda techniques you can learn from the nations. It's not such a bad thing. Remember, Rav Tachlis is a very frum guy. So the fact that he's going to say that the Goyim can teach me something, he may have thought was kind of like a bit risky. Right, especially he's reaching out to people who are the same ilk. So he said, nonetheless, you see that we do this chachma, the chachma by the Goyim, you can learn from them.
I feel, and I've met Israeli ministers, I've had discussions with them about their propaganda machine. They agree with me that it needs to strengthen. Yes. So Moshe, here's the question, to that point. Why doesn't Israel have an elite, like Golani-type team, and look at the Germans, and look at the Palestinians, who today rule propaganda? Why aren't they doing that? What do you think?
I think because people...
How do you know they're not?
Yeah, I think
they're not doing it well. I don't know why.
I think we're in an age where there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism that's being disguised as anti-Zionism.
Of course it's happening.
So therefore, all the propaganda in the world is going to be unable to root out this kind of bias that certain people have.
Yeah.
Okay. And all the attacks that have happened, they've been all in the United States, have all been white nationalists. And all these attacks, churches and mosques and shuls, chalila, there's all about there are people who have this idea that's very xenophobic about who they are and what they are. When you try to create propaganda for that type of people, you got to work really hard. So it's not just about having a crack team of propaganda paratroopers. You got to have super paratroopers. I don't think that Israel's not trying. I think they're a lot more savvy today than they were once upon a time, but they're fighting against a bunch of biases that are going to be more complex to do. They're also, by the way, the fact that they may not be winning the propaganda war here, they are winning the propaganda war in a lot of more primitive nations in Africa, where they send in groups of people to train, to teach, to lead, to educate, to heal. They send in medical groups into these countries, and the people learn that the reality is on facts on the ground. If you help me, I want to be supportive of you. Which, by the way, part of what Hamas is able to galvanize the people is because they have a whole system of hospitals and schools and institutions and charities. So everybody knows you can't go against Hamas. Everybody in the Gaza Strip knows you can't go against Hamas because you'll be isolated. So you have to accept their ideology. So Israel's trying to build their ideology into these African nations by sending in groups to try to give them what they need and really help them. But you're right, but I think it's very complex. I don't think that Israel's not trying. They can always do better. Okay. Where are we up to?
In the end, unfortunately, not in hell. They take how much they invented in Iran, how much in what's the name, in Entebbe. It's Entebbe, everything is Israeli teach them.
Okay, yeah, okay. We don't know what else.
Israel is not.
All right. Anyways, where am I up to? Second paragraph. Let's talk about learn from genocide and utilize organizations propaganda for sacred matters.
2,000 years old.
Yep. Therefore, what he's trying to say is I have to use the propaganda for his people, though. He's not using propaganda to talk to the nations of the world. Rav Tachlis is talking about trying to tell people, and these Jews, how important it is to go to Israel. Therefore, what I've said above, that we should learn from them to use propaganda to generate love of the land, is not so far-fetched. For our purposes, however, we do not need to learn this from the Gentiles, for the spies employ these exact same methods against Hashem and the land. The spies use the propaganda, so therefore we're obligated to rectify this and use these very methods to glorify Hashem and the land. I'm certain that had we done this from time immemorial, that is, enlighten the nation of the great virtue of cherishing the land, supporting the land, loving the land, and being in the land, we would not have reached the point in which there are innocent, pure-hearted people, even Torah Jews, who think that it's forbidden to preach or hear public sermons about cherishing land. Remember, he was denied speaking in certain cases. Furthermore, there would not be people who make such ear-splitting statements like, the reason that the Jews of other countries were punished is because they engaged in settling the land, and the reason Hungarian Jews were spared is because they stayed far away from this endeavor. This is something that he actually referred to above, but these were what the Hungarian Jews were saying, that we were saved because we didn't support the Jews in Israel. And unfortunately, they were wrong at the very end. I heard this historic judgment with my own ears. Innocent, simple, God-fearing Jews, even learned Hasidim, aroused themselves to speak against those who cherish the land. They did not realize they have fallen to the sin of spies, thereby increasing their age-old debt. Unwittingly, they enkindle Hashem's wrath. May the good God forgive them, for they speak out of ignorance and do not realize how far-reaching the words are. This all happened because they do not know enough about the important issue. Therefore, we must teach them the great principle in order to rectify the age-old sin of the spies. Teach them to desire and yearn for the land, not to raise hatred against its inhabitants. And this will do, and so forth. Furthermore, my brother, know that in order to rectify our ancestors' sin, everything must be done exactly as it was then. At that time, the leaders of the congregation spread evil propaganda against these Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, today as well, the leaders of the congregation must propaganda for the sake of Eretz Yisrael in order to pay off their bad loan. They must be the first ones to open the nation's eyes. They must explain there is no reason for us to remain in the foreign, pure, and polluted atmosphere of exile, nor to expend our energies in vain while the Gentiles rob the fruits of our labor from before our very eyes. The leaders must speak to their people in this fashion, arouse them within a fire, and a spark of love for the desirable land. This alone will make us worthy of redemption of the Surah cited from the Beit Yosef's Magid, pages before. The Maharsha also writes that when the Jews cherish the stones and dust of Eretz Yisrael, they will bring the appointed time of redemption closer. Thus, the leaders will unite all of Klal Yisrael together for the sake of Eretz Yisrael, and then our bad debt will be paid off. So he means cherishing the land. Of course, he means not just loving Israel; it means loving it to support those who are going there. Go there yourself. However, if the leaders neglect this matter, there is a danger that they will themselves have to pay for the bad loan they took back then. The Salacha states if two partners borrow money from someone, the lender can collect the entire debt from whichever partner he wishes, because each partner becomes a guarantor for his friend, so it's a shared debt. The same applies to the bad debt the spies and the entire generation incurred. Since they all joined together against Eretz Yisrael, they became like partners who borrowed from God. Therefore, if he wants, they can collect the debt entirely from Israel's leaders. Moreover, the leaders have a greater obligation to pay off this debt, because they were the primary cause of this loan to begin with. This explains the words of the Chaim. He writes that Israel's leaders throughout the generations will be held responsible for the fact that we're still in exile, because they should have inspired the children of Israel to love Eretz Yisrael. The great Torah scholar from Divins, Rabbi Meir Simcha Divins, concludes in his work Yeshiva Eretz Yisrael, the Gaonim would sit in the tents of Torah and wisdom, and upon the seats of the rabbinate have a foremost obligation to publicize this beloved, lofty, and profound mitzvah, which affects the overall existence and character of our nation. The great length of the exile made many of these people forget about this mitzvah. There are even those who are stubborn to oppose it publicly. This error who writes this is Sefer Yeshiva Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, this error cannot be uprooted easily unless our brilliant rabbis who sit in judgment arouse themselves to reform these stubborn people. But if the leaders fail to do this, they will delay the payment of the age-old debt. So we have to kind of work against this to make sure that we can turn it around. Okay, let's try to do, what should we do to? Let's do to maybe the end of 207, okay? Can we do that? Yeah, well, at least maybe we'll see how far we can get. Maybe till the middle of 207. I explained
Sorry, but there is not Where is Agada Elkanah learn from the Knaanim? Where is mentioned?
I think Tana de Elio, he said.
The first time I hear it.
Yeah, Elio Rabbah, chapter 8. Elio Rabbah, Perek Chet, Chelek Chet Tet. Okay, Elio Rabbah.
The first time I heard.
Yeah, it's a very unusual medrash. Yeah.
But how we can learn from the Knaanim? Knaanim is not wipe out. Yeshua wipe him out. Still it was in the land.
Elio is I don't know where they learned from. Many of the things in Elio Rabbah are said by the prophet Elio. No, seriously. Yeah? Yes. What's called Elio Rabbah. Tanat Elio, the Elio Rabbah and Elio Zuta. A lot of them are someone's sitting and a rabbi sitting, and the Elio appears to them and says these kinds of maisala. Okay, well, go look it up. Elio Rabbah, Perek Chet. Okay, we can look it up together if you want. Anyways, what was I up to? So, Samach Vav. I explained above that we must unify all of Klal Yisrael to the midst of settling the land. Not only because of our redemption depends upon it, but also in order to pay off our age-old debts. This whole thing he's been talking about is paying off this debt. Now, based on the preceding ideas, we can understand this better. Just as during the time of the spies, all of Israel united for evil to oppose Eretz Yisrael today as well, we must unify all of Israel for good to support Eretz Yisrael. This way we'll pay off our debt, tear up our record of liability, and cause the glory of God to shine upon us with the complete redemption in our days. But as long as we fail to do this, all of our complaints to God about the lengthness of our exile are in vain. In vain we pray in our synagogues and study halls. Our Father, Avinu Malkeinu, erase through your abundant mercy, Kol Shitvei Chovoseinu. It's one of our Avinu Malkeinos. Erase our bills of debt. For the debt that we incurred by despising the land still hovers over us. How can we beseech God to erase the bill of debt when it's up to us to pay this off? It's like a debtor who asks his creditor to rip up the bill of debt before it's paid. Creditor will certainly not do such a thing. We must ask Hashem to persuade all of Israel to recognize the truth and accept my words. For all that I've written here is built upon the foundations of truth, the words of Chazal, whose every utterance is true and righteous. Okay? I know. Okay, now he has to say this is about really cooperating with the non-religious. This is also what he faced the opposition. I know that the humble ones who separate themselves from the building effort do so l'shem shemaim for the sake of heaven. They fear that they and their children may be harmed by joining people whose ways have strayed from the path of Torah. We can say about such people that though their intentions are acceptable, they have good kavanos, their masim are not good. Their actions are not good for many reasons. First of all, he gives one reason. We'll do the first reason. I already mentioned that Prophet Yeshayahu said to King Chizkiyahu, do as you are commanded. Why do you involve yourself with the merciful one's hidden manners? Just so you have to do what you do. The same applies here. All Jews must be united in order to fulfill the biblically ordained positive commandment of building and settling the land. It cannot be accomplished individually. Therefore, do as you are commanded. Why do you involve yourself with God's hidden matters? What are you concerned about? Some people are not religious. Do what you have to do. Furthermore, one mitzvah leads to another. A mitzvah of goreres mitzvah. And no harm will confront any Jew who participates in this exceedingly lofty mitzvah. You're concerned that if you involve yourself in Yishuv Eretz Yisrael and they're non-religious Jews, you'll be hurt in your religiosity, but you're doing a mitzvah, because the Baruch Hu doesn't let anyone do a mitzvah get hurt. On the contrary, if a large number of Orthodox Jews join in, they will enhance the sanctity of the land as they're cited above in the name of the Holy Rebbe of Gur. Okay? There's a long piece now, so maybe we'll just stop it. We'll stop here on 207. So that's what he's saying. He's talking about now the fact that in order to erase the dead, we got to reach out to the rest of Klal Yisrael. The rest of Klal Yisrael is not religious, but don't worry, that still you can do so and change things around. So we'll stop at this. But really, to some extent, we pointed out last time, it's very similar. So we actually, I'm looking forward to coming to the end of it, actually finishing off the book. Maybe we should make a kiddush. I don't know. Okay, Ayin Gimel. Behold, thus far in this chapter, I've thoroughly explained. Page 214. 214. Ayin. Chelek Ayin Gimel. Ot Ayin Gimel. 214. 214. There you go. 214. Matzata. Lo Matzata. 214. Okay, good. Behold, this far in the chapter, I've thoroughly explained the mitzvah of building and settling land. I explored it from the beginning to end and to every corner, and I proved unequivocally that all of Klal Yisrael is obligated to fulfill this mitzvah at all times. No one can free himself from this. It's basically his rule. Everybody has to build the land. We should go to Israel. He should go to Israel. The people should go to Israel. The Hungarians should go to Israel. Hungarian Jews should go to Israel, and so forth. Today, we have an even greater obligation to arise from our slumber and indolence. Today,
the Satmars and that's who you mean. The Satmars. And what's the other group?
the Torah Karta.
They don't want to go?
The Torah Karta is an off branch of Satmar. It's a branch of Satmar. It's an offshoot of Satmar.
They don't want to go?
We learn why because we get.
Right. They meet with the heads of the branch.
Right. They are there. They are there. They're in the Torah Karta in Israel. They're a Satmar in Israel. They just don't accept the validity of the state, of the country. So they believe in the importance of being in Israel, but not setting up a government to control and revitalize and develop and so forth until God will show us. Today, of course, is 1943. We have an even greater obligation to arise from our slumber and indolence. Anyone who has eyes and ears and has seen or heard what's happened to us during recent difficult times will realize that there is enough incentive to awaken ourselves to this cause. This is interesting. Historians can entitle the decrees of the past 4 years Tash, Tasha, Tashat, B, and Tashag decrees. Okay, this is really a play on words. That the Crusades were called the Tatnu. Tatnu was the destruction in 1096. Happened in I guess 5,456. 4856, right? So that's the 1096 in the secular calendar when the Crusades came by. Also, we talk about the Khmelnytsky massacres in 1848, 1849, and the decrees of Tach v'Tat, which is I guess 500. Tach is going to be what 5,408. I'm not sure what Tatnu is. Tatnu is Taf Nun. Okay, this is. I'm not sure how to write out the numbers in English and Hebrew, but the 1848 was the Tach V'Tat, and this is the Tatnu, and therefore he's talking about the decrees that took place in the last 4 years, which is 1940, 1941, 1942, 1943. He's calling them Tash, Tasha, Tashab, and Tashag, for 5,000, 5,001, 5,002, and 5,003 decrees. Now we know he's writing it in 1943, and of course he doesn't realize that it's going to get much worse. Of course, in 44 and 45 will end. The mouth will just grow weary recounting them all, and all the pen will not suffice to record them all. I don't think he really understood the extent of the destruction that was going to take place. Who could? Due to our numerous sins, however, this all happened with God's consent, as the following medrash indicates. They asked of Rabbi Shimon Levi, "Where is the Holy One, blessed be He?" And he said, "In the great city of Rome." Great city of Rome? But the question, the answer, perplexing. What kind of question? Where's God? Where is He not? Furthermore, why was this question specifically asked during the time of Rabbi Shimon Levi? And also, what's the meaning of the answer that God has found the great city of Rome? Is it not true? Is it not true that the entire world is filled with His glory? And so here's the true interpretation of what it means. It is well known the Gentiles enacted relentless decrees against Israel at the time of Rabbi Shimon Levi. He lived right after the destruction of the temple, it's true, and Israel suffered greatly from harsh and cruel decrees. The people came to him in dismay and said, "Where is the Holy One, blessed be He? Why is He silent? And why, in the face of all this happening to Israel?" We hear the same questions today from so many people. Where's the God of the Jews? We ask the questions. Why does He keep silent and restrain Himself in the face of all this? And Rabbi Shimon Levi responded, "He is in the great city of Rome. All of these decrees emanated from Rome, the seat of the royal advisors. Therefore, Rabbi Yeshua said to them, do you think these decrees were enacted without God's knowledge? No. He too, as it were, participated in the mysterious assembly, the assembly in Shemayim, that enacted these harsh decrees. Everything was done with His consent because such was His desire. Now, it doesn't explain why, but what he's saying is God is in Rome. God was there to make the decrees, that the Romans are simply God's messengers to carry them out. It doesn't really help us answer the questions for us, but he's offering this as answering his questions. While I was still in the infamous land of hell, which is Poland, many people asked me this very question, where is the God of the Jews, blessed be He? And I too responded that He is in the place where the king and his officers meet, and He consented to their actions due to our numerous sins. The reason He consented is that Rav Shua writes in the Abbas, and Rav Yonatan writes in Abbas Yonatan, so that the Jews will devote themselves to returning to Eretz Yisrael. He's quoting here from the Abbas Yonatan, which is Rav Yonatan Eibeshitz, I believe. The Eibetz also writes, the Eibetz is the Rav Yonatan Eibeshitz, that when the Jews neglect Eretz Yisrael, harsh decrees befall them. I already discussed the above at length, and so there's no need to repeat it here. In any event, there's enough incentive to awaken ourselves to return to our desirable land. Therefore, I beseech you, my friends and brothers, arise, wake up, come forward, join us, be strong, let's be strong for the sake of Hashem, our nation, the cities of our God and our Torah. Let us unite as one man with one heart for the sake of the cities of Hashem, because the time has come for all of us to ascend and encourage us to ascend, etc., etc., and therefore we should all support the mitzvah of Aliyah, building the land.
Moshe, please, for a moment. I take major umbrage with this.
Disagreement. How about that? Better than umbrage.
I'll tell you why. We can't win. Here he's saying, well, because we're not going back to Eretz Yisrael, there's a punishment. We were banished from there.
Yeah.
And now, so you can't win there. You're banished because you're not doing what you need to do there. Then we're in Galut, and you can't win here because we're not going back there. So where do you win?
So either when you have an opportunity to go back, you go back. We were not banished forever. We were banished, and when we have an opportunity to go back, we should go back. And he suggested in a number of places that in the 20th century or the end of the 19th century, there were opportunities that presented themselves that did not present them before. This is a whole rise of nationalism and individual different groupings that comes to the fore in the 1800s. With the breakdown of the medieval world and the rise of the Enlightenment, you have all different rights being given to Jews, and we have a situation where different peoples are pushing for their own national identity, not just the Jews. Different groupings of peoples. It's the beginning of the crumbling of the British Empire, the French Empire. All the empires are coming apart because each of these groups of people has found an opportunity to speak up and ask for the rights for their land. So we did as well. If we had the opportunity, we Jews, we religious Jews, should have been asking as well. So you're right. It couldn't be done in the year 70 when the temple was destroyed. We couldn't go back. We were thrown out. The Romans came in. The Romans punished us punished us. The Romans made terrible persecutions, and after them other persecutions. But when opportunities presented themselves, we should take advantage of it. I think that's part of the answer. Okay? You know what? There's a statement by one of the Balei Tosfot. There's a statement about Rabbeinu Chaim, who was one of the Balei Tosfos, and I think it's found in the end of one of the Masechtas. The Tosfos talks about going to Eretz Yisrael. Rabbeinu Chaim says that you're not responsible to go to Eretz Yisrael today because it's so dangerous to make the trip. He's right. In the Middle Ages, to make the trip to go from Europe to Eretz Yisrael was people did it, right? But it was almost suicide. It was very, very, very risky to do this. But in our generation, and even in the 1800s and 1900s, when travel becomes much more prevalent, why shouldn't we do it? Right? Today it's easy. Today you get on a plane, but in the 20th century you got on a boat.
Gourmet meal.
I don't know about gourmet meal, but whatever it was, you were 2 weeks on the high seas. Until it was a 2-week trip.
They was going from Iraq, from Iran, by the donkey, to Eretz and go back.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay. I'm talking about even from Europe itself. There were ways to go. There were ways to go at the beginning of the 20th century.
The guy go between
The Canada.
Yes.
Took a month from
From
Morocco.
Tangier. We went to Gibraltar. The ship broke down. We spent 2 weeks on the rock.
So it
Then
didn't
they sent
take,
us to Lisbon, Halifax, Montreal, and Montreal to Toronto.
correct. So, but the actual trip on the high sea from Gibraltar
it was
to
about
Lisbon,
8 days.
it's about right. Okay. So even today, if you get off the plane, you have. It's like saying when you travel by plane, Albert, it takes you 12 hours to get to Israel. You have to add time to get to the airport and do check-in. You have to time when you land, you got to get your bags and get to wherever you're going. It's another time. So it's not a 12-hour trip. It's really more of an 18-hour trip sometimes. Okay, at any rate, so we have to support the mitzvah of Aliyah, in other words. Okay, number Ayin Dalet. King David said, and this is taken here from the book of Divrei Yomim, behold, my poverty be on ye, my affliction, I prepared gold for the house of the Lord, The Yerushalmi comments, what does in my poverty be on ye mean? What does David mean on my poverty? Did David not have an abundance of gold? So Rebbe answered, no one is wealthy compared to the one who created the world. When you talk about yourself versus God, you are poor. That is to say, David called himself poor in comparison to God. Another interpretation, be on ye in my affliction, means David would fast and consecrate his meal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Well, that is for the building of the Beit Mikdash. So he was in was his affliction, means he afflicted himself by not eating. Not that he was actually materially poor, not that he lost his assets. He used the assets of that day's meal to give to the Beit Mikdash to be used for God, the purpose of building. The Maharam Shiv explains that this verse based on Chazal's statement, those who fast are rewarded primarily for the charity they give afterwards. Page 216, the first new paragraph. The verse means that David gave charity every day he fasted. The annotator explains that the Maharam did not want to interpret the word Bi'ani as poverty because David prepared a great deal of silver and gold for the Beit Mikdash. Instead, he defines Bi'ani as self-affliction, denial, and fasting, as in those who fast are rewarded primarily for the charity they give afterwards. We see that King David, alav Hashem, limited his food intake to help build Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. I therefore like to suggest, this is funny, maybe not funny, that all members of our holy nation, wherever they are on the earth, should emulate the ways of our holy king and give all their savings to help build our holy land. I don't mean they should, this is a UJA speech. Okay. Right, I don't mean to say that they should constantly fast and afflict themselves and send the money to Israel as King David did. I simply mean they should limit their luxuries and consecrate the extra money to help build the land. Furthermore, and once again talking about communal donations, I further cited the Ezrat Nashim is saying that all of Israel together as one is responsible for building the temple. It's the community's task. David actually did this. He collected money from each tribe of Israel and only then bought the land for the Beit Mikdash. He did so the entire nation could have a portion in the edifice. David gathered donations from private individuals, but he also made sure to collect 50 shekels uniformly from each tribe. That way the money would come from the community, and this undertaking would not only be private, but communal as well. The same is true for building land. Today, it's insufficient for individual Jews to volunteer for the sacred endeavor. Right? There's a lot of things were built by Baron Rothschild and others, but it must be a communal endeavor, for it's a communal mitzvah, as the verse says, come and possess land, bo reshut aretz, in Lashon Rabim, in plural. In order to fulfill their obligation, each and every diaspora community must give a specific sum of money each year from the communal fund for the purpose of the Aliyah and the building of the land. By the way, there was no UGA at this point. I say there was no UGA in the 1940s. It only starts afterwards.
But all the changes come when the the Turkish took over, okay, before that, nobody can buy land in Israel.
Right.
Nobody.
Correct.
When the Turkish took over,
Ottoman Turks, yes.
yeah, they allowed everyone can buy. That's the reason the Jews start buy land.
But I'm saying that's one of the changes that took place. Not only was there a development of personal, of communal, not community, of group identities coming to the forefront, but there were actually opportunities in Israel where things changed, and the Ottoman Turkish Empire took over. Yeah? Yes. So in other words, he's saying even if you can't go, you've got to send money. For the merit of Israel will stand by us to deliver us from distress. For behold, David collected money from the kosher the 12 tribes immediately after the plague, and God the prophet told him that the calamity occurred because the Jews neglected to build the Beit Mikdash, according to this medrash. Same is true today. All of our troubles are a result of the fact that we neglected Eretz Yisrael, as I've cited from many sources of Chazal. Therefore, we must engage in this manner on a communal level, as David did, etc., etc., etc. In addition, every Jew should consider what has happened to all the gold and silver and property that belonged to the diaspora Jews of the last few centuries. It has all gone to waste and fallen to the hands of Esau. The Jews were not wise and intelligent enough to invest their wealth in Eretz Yisrael, to buy fields and build houses. This is Ayin Hay in the middle of page 217, which remains permanently in Jewish hands. The Rivash writes that Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is not a transient mitzvah, but a mitzvah that endures forever. It benefits the entire Jewish nation, that the Holy Land not remain in the hand of the defiled ones. The diaspora Jews should have learned from Yaakov Avinu. While he was battling Esau, he developed ways to save money and property from falling into Esau's hands, and he refers to something that he quoted above, and I don't recall it offhand at this point. After the bitter exile and we find rest from our enemies, we will have an even greater obligation to turn our attention to Eretz Yisrael and raise His glory by acquiring fields and building houses. We learned this from Yaakov Avinu, about who says, Yaakov arrived complete in the city of Shechem. Yaakov Shalem Shechem Be'eretz Canaan, which is the land of Canaan, and Vayikenes Pnei Ho'er. He bought a portion of the field. Rashi comments like a person who says to his friend, so and so escaped from the lion's teeth and has returned unarmed, complete. He's Shalem, he's complete. And the Ibn Ezra writes, he bought a portion of land. Scripture mentions this to demonstrate that Eretz Yisrael has great virtues, and he who has a portion in it is considered as if he has a portion of the world to come. So when Yaakov escaped from Esau and comes back to Eretz Yisrael, what does he want to do to create a schut for himself? He buys a piece of land. Our holy books learn from here that the Jews became worthy of the world to come when they inherited the land. These books explain that the verse, your people are righteous, they will inherit the land forever. Neitzer matzai maseyodai litba'er. I think that's the pasuk. Okay. V'yameh kulam tzadikim, lo olam yeshuaretz. That's the pasuk. And Yeshayahu 60 means by inheriting the land, your people are all righteous. By inheriting the land, they become righteous and worthy of the land to come. Okay, the Medrash states that after Yaakov was saved from Esau's clutches, he thought to himself, I'll do a mitzvah that Hashem will make so important, even more important than all the other mitzvahs. What's the mitzvah that he did? He bought a piece of land in Israel. We should do the same for Hashem to have compassion on us and keep us alive. We escaped from the lion's teeth, unharmed, at least physically. Of course, not true. Therefore, we must emulate Yaakov Avinu and take part in purchasing land. So we should actually support the land of Israel, send money, but we also should purchase land and move to Eretz Yisrael as well. The Medrash says,
something for that. Time of David, when David was short, and not ever said, you go fight the Goyim.
Yeah.
How you can send the people to go to the war? No reason.
I'm not sure I understand. Could you say it again?
When Mara said, when it was short in Israel, they don't have enough food or
shortage.
Yeah. And then I say, you know what, go fight with Goyim, and take Shalal, and like that we have enough.
So how did the people have strength to do that?
No, how can send him to the war, David?
He's the king.
So send people to get killed?
That's what a king does. I don't mean to say that directly. King makes decisions about going to war. And you who are not a king, you are a peasant, you have to follow the king. I think the Rambam says that a king is entitled to lose a sixth of the people and still be considered a good king. In other words, there are casualties. Anytime there's war is terrible.
Yes, we know that.
But we all understand that war has a certain purpose for certain values. This was the value of survival. And for us, it is hard to imagine how a single individual has the power as a king to make decisions for everybody else, because we live in a country that has elected governments. But the elected government, I grew up in an American society that had the Vietnam War. where the decisions were made to draft every kid who was 18 years old. And not every kid was sent over to Vietnam, but you got a number. It was a selective service, and they usually got about halfway through the numbers of the days of the year. My number was 167. That was considered actually a safe number. But because I was in Yeshiva University, I also had a deferral or suspension, right? But the people nobody wanted to go to the war. It was a terrible war. But how did people go? Because if you didn't go, you were draft dodged. You'd be in prison, or you ran away to Canada where they couldn't catch you.
Why was it a safe number?
Why was it a safe number? Because you were on the year that you turned 18, they pulled every birthday out of a hat. So they arranged those from 1 to 365. So the 13th of February in the year of my year was number 167 out of 365. So they never took all 365 every year. Now theoretically they could take 365. And once you got past the year of 18, they could still draft you until you're 35 years old. But the reality was they only took 18-year-olds to active duty. So as a result, it was considered 160 was about 120 was about the number that you were probably going to be drafted.
Terrible situation.
It was a terrible situation because they would come back in body bags. How could they make such decisions? It wasn't even the war. Forgive me for sounding like the university kid that I was. It wasn't even our war. What did we have to do with Vietnam? What were we there for? The bottom line was that's the government. The government made those decisions. The government was elected by the people. The process was put in place in the 50s and the 60s. It escalated. So what does that mean? The United States was a bad country? No, it means they made certain decisions until they could extract themselves from Vietnam. At the end, it still was a mess. Okay, I'm sorry you're getting personal.
No, but one of the lines was hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?
Right, it was better red than dead. Okay, my friend's brother joined the National Guard. Now, I'm sorry for rambling, but the National Guard is the local army that is used when there's floods and disasters and they come in. The good news and the bad news is when you go to the National Guard, you can't be sent over to Vietnam. The bad news is you have to serve in the National Guard. So he opted you volunteered to go into the National Guard. So the way he protected himself, he went serving in the National Guard. I lost touch with that family. I don't know what happened, but I remember his older brother went to the National Guard. By the way, it's not so bad going to the army. They get a lot of perks and education that is there. But if you go to Vietnam and you even look, the people being sent to Iraq, they come back damaged, trauma, post-traumatic syndrome.
War is a disaster, no question at all. No, but my question was, how do we don't have enough food to go fight in those countries?
So the answer is, it's a famine. We don't have enough. Okay, I'm whatever it is. And when you're the king, you're in charge.
But he had a lot of money. Why didn't he just buy it?
Well, we talking about when there was a shortage, it was famine. It wasn't always that simple. Anyways, we're getting off topic. And you're kind of moving me really. I got off topic myself. Okay, I go back at the rampart. Better red than dead. Okay. The Medrash states that actually the truth was most of the rallies I went to were for Zoe jewelry. We didn't really go. Though I do remember the year of the Vietnam moratorium when all the professors. It was 1971. When all the professors went on strike and wouldn't give exams to protest the war in Vietnam, and all the universities had to stop classes. Can you imagine that? You didn't have to take your exams.
1971? The war finished before that, no?
No, the war did not finish before that. The war did not finish before that at all. It was starting to go downhill at that point. But the Vietnam moratorium was June of 1971 when all the universities were protesting and all the professors, or most of the professors says we're not giving exams as a way to protest. And all the classes just ended like that.
1971.
It's June of 1971. You look it up. They still were there. They still were sending people. Trust me.
When Israel was in 67, still were Vietnam workers?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Man, you had Nixon. You had
Okay. Who wants to go look this up first and bring this in for next week? You look it up on the internet. Look it up. Look up Vietnam moratorium. Look up Vietnam. It's a terrible chapter in American history. The Medrash states that God the prophet, this is Ayin Zayin, told David that the plague came to punish Israel for the failing to demand the building of the Beit Mikdash. Immediately following this revelation, David went to Ornan the Yevusi, and purchased a plot upon which to build the temple. In Divrei Yomim, so David gave Ornan for the place 600 gold shekels by weight. What would you buy today with 600 gold shekels in land and real estate?
Why he don't fight it? Why didn't fight it?
I don't know, because I guess they had some peace treaty with him. I don't know why he didn't just take it away from him.
Yeah.
I guess he wanted really to own it. Probably
in the fighting, not own it.
I don't know.
Well, it's the same. Abraham paid for his plot.
Yeah. Yes.
He wanted to show that he paid for it.
So this means that fighting is not own it.
I don't know.
Not necessarily. I mean, look at the way the world looks at Eretz Yisrael. Parts that
Maybe.
were taken over.
Why don't we go back? Well, let's try to finish this, and maybe I think it'll answer some of the questions, some of your questions at least. So in the Sefer Shmuel, it says, however, he gave 50 silver shekels. So the Talmud raised the discussion. Rava points out the contradiction of Masechet Zvachim 116b, and Rashi reckons Rashi as follows: he took 50 shekels from each tribe, which equaled 600 shekels altogether. So 650 times 12 is 600. So that all of Israel would have a share in it. Thus, when David bought the site of the temple, he wanted all Klal Yisrael to have a share, so that God would forgive them for failing to demand its construction. So how would you get involved with all the Jewish people? You couldn't just simply take a battalion and conquer it and take it away from Ornan HaYevusi. You bought it and had everybody use the money or give the money to purchase it together. Maybe that's the answer. The Medrash derives the Kal V'chomer. If David's generation, which preceded the Beit Mikdash, was punished for not having demanded construction, then we who had a temple which was destroyed because of our sins will certainly be punished for neglecting to demand this construction. The Medrash also cites a parable: a father once beat his son repeatedly. Don't try this at home. Finally the son asked, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" And the father answered, "Why do you disregard my commandments?" So this is the Nimshal. That's why Chazal instituted the 3 daily prayers for the return of our land and the building of our temple. Thus all our afflictions and exile come because we disregard our obligation to return our land. So the Medrash is trying to say, because we're not following God's command to try to go back to Israel, God punishes us more. I know Jeff is going to have a little bit of a little umbrage there. Therefore now, conflicting medrashim. Therefore now, when the terrible blows have ceased, we must do what David did immediately without delay, purchase our land in the site of the house of our lives, which of course the Beit Mikdash. Then our punishments will end. Furthermore, I explained above based on David that it is insufficient for private individuals to buy portions of land in Eretz Yisrael. All of Klal Yisrael together must become involved. Moreover, we anticipate that when the war ends, the kingdoms will grant the Jewish nation permission to return and take hold of its independence. This is inheritance. This is unbelievable. He is predicting what will take place a few years after the end of World War II. Certainly then his obligation rests on the entirety of Israel as a communal matter, not a private one. The Rashbesh, son of the Tashbesh, thoroughly explains the positive commandments of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael in his response up. He writes the mitzvah is for individuals to ascend to the land, not the entire nation, because we swore not to go up as a wall, but some people will go up. Hence, after the nations give us permission to take hold and ascend to Israel willingly, this mitzvah once again be incumbent upon the entire nation. Then in addition to the fact that every individual must strive to return, it will also be a communal obligation. So he's saying if a small group goes up and starts to build up the land, eventually it will spread to everybody else. Okay, let me continue. I believe it's appropriate to instruct people to say the following when donating money to help build the land of Israel. This is fascinating because he's giving you like a hineni muchan mizilman. I hereby give this donation for the purpose of building our land in order to fulfill the positive settlement commandment of settling the land, which Hashem commanded us in order to rectify its source in the supernal world. This is like a Shem Yichud Kucha Bricha. You find a Hasidish Sidurim whenever you're doing a bracha. This way the donation will be imbued with exalted sanctity, and the evil forces will be unable to mar the building process or have a portion in it. It'll show that you're doing it l'shem shemayim. Everything will be done sacredly and according to the will of Hashem. And I found a source for this in Magid Meishar. Magid Meishar is written by the author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Beit Yosef, in which the angel has these conversations with the Beit Yosef. And the angel says, "Behold, in this holy parsha it says, you shall make for me a sanctuary, and they shall take from me a portion." And it says, this alludes to the fact that regarding sacred matters, one must say, this thing is for holiness. Whenever a person does a holy act, one should say, this is for the sake of holiness. Similarly, Similarly, when someone who wants to use a chair set aside for Eliyahu, the bris milah must say, this is the kisei shel Eliyahu Navi. You're setting aside the kisei for Eliyahu, so you're making it very clear what the purpose is all about. I'm sorry if I'm rushing, but I want to reach a certain point, and I've got to stop in about 5 minutes. Okay, therefore, it is proper to make the above-mentioned declaration when donating to the building effort. You have to have the kavanah. Moreover, if all the workers say this before plowing, sowing, or doing any work, they will undoubtedly create a great rectification, a tikkun olam, a tikkun. They'll render the external forces, the evil forces, powerless to attach themselves to any of their actions. Let it be known, however, that it's not essential to the actual mitzvah. You don't have to say the l'shem yichud, even if a person works without making the declaration, without the intention. Let's say he's a secular person, he still fulfills the mitzvah, all the aspects of the positive commandment. This is implicit in the words of the Archaim, who says, and is consistent with the accepted rule, that lack of intent does not inhibit the mitzvah that involves an action. Furthermore, the Rashba writes that if the performance of a mitzvah is irrevocable, it remains unblemished even if performed sinfully. And therefore, however, in order to perform the mitzvah in the best possible way, it's certainly proper to do as I suggested, that you have this kavanah intention to do the mitzvah. Okay, one more piece, one more ayin tet. We're going to do ayin tet to the middle of the next page. So I'm rushing because it gets me to a real good point to kind of break at that point. Tell me if I go too quick, but don't stop me. The Prophet Yeshayahu says, the Lord God who gathers the dispersed of Israel says, I will gather others to him besides those already gathered to him. Okay, the Ramban explains that God will first gather many, but not all of the dispersed of Israel. Then after the war of Gog, he will gather others to the ones who already gathered. This verse refers to those who are lost in the land of Assyria, the 10 lost tribes. They'll be gathered a second time. In his work, Yushat Zion, Tzvi Hirsch Kalisher points out a contradiction to this. The Ramban himself writes the 10 tribes will be gathered first, not second. Rav Kalisher answers that both statements are true. If many Jews who are lost in the land of Assyria assemble in Eretz Yisrael, they will surely not come to a desolate and ruined land. Undoubtedly, some will come before them to bring forth bread from the land. So first you got a first group, then a second group. And afterwards, the rest of the people will come to the land filled with Hashem's blessings. So the desert will become fertile, full of fields and vineyards. So in other words, you see that there is first group of small people, and then later they will come. So the 10 tribes will send first a small group, and then later the rest of the 10 tribes will come. In any event, we see that Yehuda is always first, and he will also be the first to return to the land at the time of the redemption. Therefore, we, the descendants of Yehuda ben Yamin, because we, the remaining 2 tribes, who are all Jews, Yehudim from the tribe of Yehuda, Benjamin, must lead the way to rebuilding the land. Afterwards, the 10 tribes will be revealed, and the complete gathering will take place speedily in our days. Eventually, Hashem will widen our borders, grant us rest from all our enemies who surround us like bees, stinging us mercilessly. And when this happens, all of us will join together and become involved in the building effort. For Nachum, the prophet Nachum writes, the gates of your land have been opened wide, has been fulfilled through us. We will disregard our newfound freedom and here in the exile, and make sure not to use it to help us to remain here before God. After the war, when we survive, we're not going to stay in the exile, we'll go to Israel. For if we remain here, the nations will oppress us once again, as the prophet says. So you will rejoice over nothingness, who say, indeed, with our strength we've taken horns for ourselves. Horns are our success. For behold, I'll raise up a nation against you, O house of Israel, says Hashem, and they will oppress you again. So if we stay in the land of the diaspora, we'll have oppression again. Okay, are we seeing this now? I don't know. Thus the nations oppressed us only because we rejoiced over our lot here in exile. We felt that we were strong as if we had horns with which to gore in all directions. But Hashem showed us that we rejoiced at nothing, and that our greatness here was like a fleeting dream. Therefore, let us learn from the past and use our newfound freedom to establish great movements, to encourage all segments of our nations to ascend to Zion with happy song and eternal joy, and Hashem will therefore fulfill His promise. Okay, this leads us up to the final piece of the conclusion for this chapter. Here's where we're at. We are at conclusion of chapter 3. There's a short essay that follows that in chapter 3, and then there's chapter 4, which really talks about unity of the people and bringing peace to Israel. So we're almost towards the end. Okay, and I want to stop here. I got to run. That's okay with you. I'm sorry I ran through the piece here at the end, but I'm really excited to try to get to the end of this. I'm thinking, by the way, just to tell you what I want to do after I finish this book, I am thinking of doing something that was written by Rav Kook about tefillah. Okay, I'll tell you more about it next time. You tell me if you think it's a good idea, because I'm not sure myself.
This is so prescient.
Yeah. Right, he was very
To be doing this today.
which is really about the kingdom of heaven, despising kingdom of heaven, kingdom of house of David, and the Beit Mikdash. That is to say, grant honor to your people in the davening of Rosh Hashanah corresponds to the kingdom of his heaven. Happiness to your land, simcha li'artzecha, joy v'sasan li'irecha, joy to your city. This is taken from the Shemona Esrei, the repetition Amida before the Kodesh. on Rosh Hashanah. So give v'tein kavod le'amecha. Then it says simcha li'artzecha, sasan li'recha. This refers to the land and the Beit Mikdash. And usmichat keren leDavid avdecha, flourishing of pride to David, refers to the kingdom and the house of David. After living among the non-Jews for close to 2,000 years, we have mingled with the nations and learned their ways. Most of today's Jews have absolutely no concept of Judaism. It was true in 1942 and 3 and true today. We can't expect them to return and seek out the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of the house of David because they have no idea what these things are. Rather, what do they seek? They seek Eretz Yisrael, which includes all of these things as I explained at length. Chazal allude to this when he says, he who dwells in Eretz Yisrael is like one who has God. So if you couldn't, a God. If you can't seek out David, you can't seek out Jerusalem, you can't seek out your people because you don't, kingdom of heaven, you don't know what it means, at least you're looking for Eretz Yisrael. The kingdom of the house of David and the kingdom of heaven are one and the same, as is known to the Bali Kabbalah. And since we see that today's pioneers sacrifice themselves for Eretz Yisrael, they seek out these three things without knowing it. And therefore, in Peitet, in the next paragraph, he introduces pretty much the next chapter. Every Jew must join the Olim and help sanctify Hashem's name through all of Klal Yisrael. We say this in our holy prayers in the days of awe. And v'yesu kolam aguda achat lasos v'tzon avicha. They may do your single society to do your will wholeheartedly. If we know God, our Lord, our God, the dominion of yours is strength in your hand, blah, 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 blah. That is to say, if all the Jews form a single society, they'll have strength and might to God's dominion, and He will elevate their pride to the highest heights. This coincides with the Medrash. The Ramban says in the verse, He Bishur Melech, etc., etc. When is the Holy One blessed be established above? When all of King Israel forms a society below. And therefore this is the end of the final word, the coda to chapter 3, finished on 23rd of Elul 5703 in the capital of Budapest. Hashem should fulfill the verse that He will rise up against us and we should see the Mashiach and blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's the end of chapter 3. Now there's an addendum. It's very important to do this addendum because he actually talks about an argument he has. And someone who quotes to him the Rebbe of Shenova. He's talked about a lot of these people who've actually been against him. Here he finds someone actually comes over to him. A man came up to me with an notebook in his hand and asked if he could show me something. I took it from him and saw that it was a Divrei Yecheskel by the Rebbe of Shenova Zeichat Tzadik L'Vacha. He then showed me that this man of God, the Rebbe of Shenova, disapproved of working the fields of Eretz Yisrael. Rather, we must strengthen the settlement of the land only by sending an abundance of holy coins, charity, to those who are engrossed in Torah and divine service, until Hashem elevates our pride and returns our captivity. This is the old way it used to be. That there was chalukah, they would collect in the diaspora to send money for people to be in Eretz Yisrael in the cities like Yerushalayim, other communities where they would sit and learn and eke out a salary by the charity that was given, the charity that was divided out among them, chalukah. No one went to learn. So the Rebbe Shenova is when the Zionism began to come together to build land, wrote against this and says we actually have to do more charity to keep the people learning rather than building up the land. So this guy comes over to Rav Teichel and shows him the Divrei Yecheskel by the Rebbe of Shenova, which says this. I responded with the words of our master, the Chassam Sofer. Students study under the mentors primarily to learn how to compare one case to another. The Rosh writes one can say that nowadays as well, not every case found in the Talmud, and the arbiter simply compares cases. In other words, not every case is found in the Talmud. You have to make an application. Therefore, there is concern that his comparison is incorrect. You have to know how to analyze the case in the Gemara and make the application. For this reason, there is a custom that when a person originates his own idea, we say in German, gleich, or gleich, it's either similar or dissimilar. Do you ever hear the term people use in Yiddish? Is gleich, is nicht gleich, is gleich? Maybe not. Nope, no Yiddish speakers here. Yeah, Yiddish speaker here. Good. I'm not a Yiddish speaker. Okay. My mother, you know what? I learned my Yiddish later in life. It's a big mishmash of Yiddish because my mother actually spoke a very good Yiddish. However, I grew up as a kid in an Italian neighborhood. My mother was actually afraid to speak to me in Yiddish because she was afraid the Goyim would think we're talking about them. So she stifled herself, and she actually spoke an amazing Yiddish. She's an American. She grew up in the Lower East Side, though. So I had to figure it out later on when I spoke to people in Yiddish, or I had a shir once in Yiddish. I had to learn what the guy was saying. So, but anyways,
I spent time when I was a child with my grandfather,
who spoke Yiddish.
This was in the summer. I spent 3 months there, and he only spoke Yiddish.
Well,
you learned Yiddish.
You did. I did better than you. I spent 2 years in the shir with Rabbi Yerucham Grel, Zichron Levracha, who only spoke Yiddish, and I had to figure out Yiddish to understand what he was saying. And I got it pretty much. I could never understand when he was ranking me out and making fun of me what he was saying. It was very, very disturbing. He was extremely acerbic and cynical. So when he took you apart, he took a strip off of you in Yiddish. Anyways, profound and extremely fine logic is needed to distinguish between two cases, but by doing so, several questions are resolved. Therefore, the teacher analyzes the cases, shows the students how the fine line is between the two, and this is to learn the true method of deciding halacha. So what he's saying basically, if you study the Gemara, it's not the Gemara is always relevant, but you have to make the application. For example, sometimes people talk about if you read Baba Kama, about a shor shenoga sapara, an ox that gores a cow. People say it's the same thing when you have car accidents. You can read Baba Kama, talk about how the ox gores this one and gores that one, and make the application to one car hits another car. And really, the answer is it's not true. It's a poor comparison because the car does not have a mind of its own. The car is actually you. The car is an extension of you. The car is actually an Adam. The car is a destruction done by man. An ox has a mind of its own. So an ox is a semi-domesticated animal that sometimes went a little crazy. That's a little different type of mazik. Your driving accidents are more closer to when you actually, people in the days of Talmud, someone hit someone else.
And there's no bore. A car doesn't go into a bore.
So the answer is it could go into a pothole, but usually people don't dig potholes. Right.
Once the brakes always fail, in which case it was a muad.
There you go. Okay. A muad. It was more than once.
If you did what?
But the brakes fail, it's your brakes. It's not the cow's brakes. It's not the cow's brakes. I'm trying to say the cow, the bull, the ox is not the car. You are the car. In other words, among the Arba Avos Nazikim, one is man. The cow is actually more man.
Sometimes
Drive like an ox.
the car.
Okay, well, car does not have a mind of its own. Unless you say someone cut the brakes. But then the brakes don't cut themselves.
Soon
there'll be cars with their own minds. Right, there'll be driverless cars. There you go. That would make a difference. Good for you. Thank you, Chanoch. Okay. Thus, the determination of practical halacha depends primarily on the comparison between cases. If the case at hand is similar to the one from which we would like to learn, with all its conclusions and details, then we can derive the law from that case. However, if there's the slightest distinction between the two, the law changes, we can't derive one from the other. Therefore, if inadequately trained students want to apply the laws from one case to another, this is the end of 223 if you lost the place, because they think the two cases are similar, a sage can analyze the issue and show explicitly the comparison is incorrect. Thus, the law they originally derived, whether by stringency or leniency, is annulled. So if you realize there's a difference between the cases, for example, we make application all the time. Is electricity, what's the reason for electricity is usher? A lot of reasons offered. Is it aish? Is it like sparking? Is it molid? Is it nolad? Is it something? It might be called something called makam apatish. When you finish off something, there's a special malacha to complete something. So completing it. So it's very complicated.
The makam apatish is much easier than honest law.
No. Makam apatish is one of the 39 malachot, avot malachot. Makam apatish is one of the 39 cardinal principles. It has a lot of applications. All I'm saying is we try to apply this all the time, and you realize that sometimes you've got to be very careful and clear how the comparison runs. I'll just give you an example off the top of my head. So he's trying to say, therefore, the Rebbe Shenova, who wrote about being against developing the lands of Israel, and more important, to support the people learning in Israel with charity, he lived in an era where maybe the application was not exactly what it is today in 1943. This principle will help me refute your findings in the holy work. He's speaking to this chassid who came to him, the Divrei Yechezkel, which you thought would contradict my entire thesis. Realize, my son, that these concerns of the Rebbe of Shenova are not new to me. I alluded to them above. We discussed them earlier on at the beginning of chapter 3. I made a distinction between his era and ours. I wrote as follows. Similarly, the statement of the Holy Rebbe Shenova at the end of Yechezkel refers to his era when Israel enjoyed tranquility and exile. Today, however, when our very lives are being taken from us, even the Chassam Sofer, even the Avad Yonatan, even the Rebbe of Shenova would admit that Hashem is ordering us to leave the lands of exile and go to the land that God seeks out. So it's interesting. He doesn't take the Rebbe of Shenova on directly. He simply says that no matter, even if you're opposed to this, today in 1942, 1943, you have to change your mind. Thus, I too was bothered by your finding and by the comparison you want to make between the two cases. However, I made a distinction and showed that they are not comparable. Therefore, you cannot apply his words to our situation. My words will remain valid in both theory and practice. He's saying, even though if you accept your words of the Rebbe Shenova, that was for them, but today, in the 20th century, in the World War II, you've got to really realize it doesn't apply. It's a shas tzchak, or it's a changed reality. No, he's not arguing so much based upon theory as much as practical, right? It's somewhat disappointing, because you would expect him to say, well, the Rebbe Shenova was wrong. He says, well, no. But even if the Rebbe Shenova is right, he was right. He's not right today.
Does that mean that the title would, if it hadn't been what was going on, he would maintain his...
It's fascinating. Nobody knows. He clearly feels that the Holocaust is a kick in the pants to wake up. He himself changes his mind. That's what he's actually going to say on page 227. We'll get to it today before you get out of here. I hope. So he says that, he himself thought that, and he realized that he was mistaken once things went awry. But he used the Holocaust not as a punishment, but really as a wake-up call to go to Eretz Yisrael.
Very bad wake-up.
It's a very bad wake-up. The question is, does he really understand in 1943 in Budapest how extensive the destruction was? Does he really understand how comprehensive the Nazis wanted to be? I don't know.
I think their idea of what the Gulag was is totally different. It's absolutely different in those days.
How so?
The Gulag.
How so?
They people gave money, they supported, but the idea of a Medina.
Correct. Right. No, this was brand new, and that's what Rav Teichel says. Rav Teichel basically says, now that all this bad has happened, it's really a wake-up call to see that things have changed, that God has given us an opportunity. At the same time things are going down in Europe, there's an opportunity to go to Israel, and we should wake up and do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We don't. Here's the unknowns. Nobody knows what would have happened if Rav Teichel had survived. What would he have said today in 2019? What would he have said in 1950? Would he have changed his mind when he saw that people didn't come together between 1943 and 2019? Or would he say, well, there's more Torah learning going in Israel, and people, to some extent, have gone farther apart, but they've come closer together? Or not? What would he have said if there hadn't been a Holocaust? What would he have said if he had gotten out? These are all unknowns.
So this is addendum written after the chapter 3, and it looks like he's backtracking a bit.
No, it looks like he's dealing with one specific case where someone took him to task for it. He doesn't backtrack. He kind of takes the easy way out. He takes the easy way out. He says, he doesn't want to say that you're wrong and I'm right. He says, I'm right. You may have your Rebbe that you believe in, but at the same time, his application would not work. Even he would agree today to what I'm saying. Even without trying to take him on directly, and maybe he took him on early on in the Sefer, but you, even though you believe in him and you follow him, he's not here. The Rebbe Shenova is really from 100 years before. Today, he would have changed his tune.
Why do you think for a 35 they said, he's coming, let's go from here. And nobody said, no, he's crazy. Why he know that? How do you know he's coming?
Why do people say today they're doing things to Jews they didn't do 30, 40 years ago?
But isn't this whole 30,000-foot premise is, let's all go to Israel and things will work out?
Yeah. Yes.
So then isn't that prescient? Because it is happening?
Yeah, so I'm saying it is happening. It's happening. It hasn't happened completely, but a lot has happened. I agree. Look at what Israel is today. Look at what Israel. You know what? Israel is really about an opportunity to change the dynamic of what the Jewish people are. We did the piece last week. We never did really the continuation yet. We'll do it maybe tomorrow. We talked about the fact that what's the whole idea of Yom HaTzmaut? It stops the Chil Hashem. It was a salvation of the Jewish people. It's Atchal the Gula. But things have really come a great distance. I agree. It hasn't really come. There has not been a unity of the people completely. Right? The religious are religious, the non-religious are non-religious, and there's still a very big divide between them. Okay, but you have religious people in the government. You have a government that's will have religious parties. You have the needs or the specific values of the religious community is going to be represented in the next government. We hope. And as a result, we are coming together.
But I guess where I'm coming from is that he was avoiding the argument with Rabbi Shinova.
Right.
By saying, hey, you have an unusual situation, and therefore it's different. But in a way, he's saying, to me, the better thing would have been to have said,
you're wrong.
Back in your days,
yeah,
when it wasn't so bad, the absolute truth of the importance of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, which certainly many other commentators said, is there. And so, in a way, it weakens his case.
Right.
Because he's saying it's only if there's a problem.
Okay, so yes. I want to point out where he writes this. He writes this as like an addendum. It's like an excursus. He doesn't really put it in his main body. Okay, so I'm not. It's called addendum chapter 3. I'm not quite sure if this was actually put here at first. The chapter 3 we really wrote at the end of the book. It also fits in, by the way, as a if it does belong here, it's almost like a transition to the next piece, which talks about unity of the people, regardless of how different you and I are. Not you and I. Regardless of how different he is from the Rebbe Shinova, there's a way they should be all working together to go to Eretz Yisrael. Even the Rebbe Shinova now. So he's not talking about necessarily everybody changing their mind. He's talking about trying to find some common way that everybody works together. And maybe why this is. Or it may have been that just simply he's just recording what he had the opportunity to tell this guy who came to him. He didn't want to read him the whole book. He said, I'm going to just tell you that even if you think you're right, you were right. The situation there is much different. And he also may be recognizing that the situation is deteriorating even more. From the time they began writing the book until the book where he's up to, which is pretty much towards the end of the book, that things are going down. So whatever other people may have thought then, which you could argue theologically, philosophically, practically speaking, things have to change. Okay, but these are all valid points. You're right. I told you I didn't think it was the strongest part about his ideology, but you'll see he's going to develop it in terms of how to change. Okay, where are we up to? I'm going to prove the veracity of my words. With the Lord, God said to Abraham, go forth from your land, Bereshit 12:1. Rashi comments, did he not already leave the place? It says, Lech lecha me'artzecha, but he already left the place, and God told him to go to Haran with his father. So Hashem said, go even further away from you there and leave your father's house. And the Shalah, the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, Rabbi Rav Horowitz writes, Hashem knew that Avram kept the entire Torah, even the rabbinic prohibitions and injunctions. Presumably Avram took upon himself every stringency. Therefore it's possible he did not want to ascend to Eretz Yisrael and live there on a permanent basis because he wanted to fulfill Rabbi Yehuda's dictum. This is a very interesting thing. He who ascends from Babylonia to Eretz Yisrael transgressed the positive commandment. As it says, they will be brought to Babylonia, and from there they will stay. So maybe that's why Avram didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael, even though it was not yet applicable. All of Avram Avinu's experiences allude to future events. Kind of really far-fetched. But therefore, first Hashem, God commanded him to root himself in the original place of Babylonia. Hashem then, Avram goes to Canaan, where Hashem commanded him go even further. For now, you are permitted to ascend to Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Yehuda only permitted ascending from Babylonia to Eretz Yisrael, not from the other lands to Eretz Yisrael. That's how we darshan, is why he had to make a stop in the middle. Now,
what's this Rabbi Yehuda?
He's quoting Rabbi Yehuda says that people are not supposed to go from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael because it says in Yirmiyahu that you're going to go to Bavel and stay in Bavel itself. So
we know that that's true for everything that happened before and after.
I don't know. So he's making an application. I don't know the Gemara. There's the same Gemara that talks about the 3 vows and talks about not ascending by force and not taking back the land. I'm not sure. I'm really not acquainted with this Gemara as well as perhaps I should. So do not ask, how was Avram allowed to go back from Babylon to Haran when it says that we brought to Babylon and they will stay? If it's prohibited to emigrate to Israel, it's certainly prohibited to emigrate to other lands. So how could he go from Bavel to other lands? He should stay in Bavel. He shouldn't have left Mesopotamia at all. The answer is that Avram left in order to save his life. One may rely on miracles. He's saying that even if Avram believed that you were not allowed to go to other lands, he had to leave Bavel because he couldn't stay there. When he was cast in the fiery furnace, it was a hint that he should get far away from there. Hashem wanted him to first settle in Haran and then ascend to Eretz Yisrael. So what the Shlah is saying, that even if you believe that you should not go to Eretz Yisrael, but you got to protect yourself first. If the way to save yourself is to go to Eretz Yisrael, you should go to Eretz Yisrael. That's the point of why he's bringing this in as a knockoff to the chassid of the Divrei Cheskel of the Shnova Rebbe, who thinks that he said that we shouldn't go to the Eretz Yisrael, we should just send money to Eretz Yisrael. He says, but if you thought that, but today you got to go because you got to save yourself. So,
I'm sorry, I can't logically think about this. This Rabbi Yehuda was, 1,000 years after Abraham?
Yes.
How we bring this an argument against Abraham?
It's a drash. It's a drash. It's a drash. It's a drash.
I would say not.
That's just like saying they kept all those.
You would say skip the page. I know. Okay. It's a far-fetched drash. I agree. I admit. He's trying to bring out of this is the first thing you have to do, even if you think that there's a prohibition, is you got to save yourself. So even if you think you have to stay in Bavel, but if the staying in Bavel is meant to be suicide, don't stay in Bavel. So that's even though Avraham Avinu accepted Rabbi Yehuda's.
Take Harambam. He come to Eretz Israel. He want to live in Israel. He say cannot survive. He will go to Egypt.
So even assuming that you accept this drush, what's the drush mean? The drush means that the application is not to reject the drush, work with the drush, and take the shlah who writes this fantastic out of pshat interpretation that Avram was concerned about this Gemara that was written thousands of years later, but nonetheless the meaning of it in the application is that you can't stay in a place which is meant to be suicidal where your life is in danger. So even though Avraham Avinu accepted Rabbi Yehuda's prohibition, which we find difficult, but he accepted, Hashem forced him to leave Babylonia because his life was in danger. And even though Hashem saved him from the fiery furnace, He prohibited him from staying in Babylonia because his salvation occurred miraculously. Instead Hashem forced him to go to Eretz Yisrael. And even though there's a prohibition to leave Babylonia, Avraham was permitted to leave because saving lives overrides all the Torah prohibitions. The Talmud says, "V'chai bohem," and live by them and don't die by them.
He was not permitted to leave. He was ordered to leave.
So Hashem actually orders him to leave, even though the assumption of the Shalah is that you can't go from Bavel back to Eretz Yisrael.
I can't go. Hashem tells me to go.
So you see,
more than Rabbi.
So you see that? Yes. You see that Hashem is overriding His own command because He's giving us.
One is Torah and one is.
I agree. It's a drash. I'm not going to argue. I just want to go ahead. Okay. But you're right. This is not pshat. It's not pshat at all. Okay. Avram was prohibited from staying in Babylonia because he had been saved miraculously, and one may not rely upon future miracles. Now, after the miracle that cost him, everyone feared him and recognized he was a man of God over whom. So now the Shlah asserts that all of Avraham Avinu's experience allude to future events. Thus, Avram taught his descendants that if they are ever saved from mortal danger in a particular place, they may not remain there. Instead, they must move far away and go to Eretz Yisrael. That's the implication. He's trying to bring this thrushto, this comparison, that even if you are ever saved from one place, you should not stay there anymore. If you were saved by being in Bavel, or because of the fire, because of the furnace, you should try to move away from that to not have it happen again.
The Rambam, right?
Yeah. Not for so let's see the application, because the application is more important than maybe the drash. Let's apply this to our situation. Behold, the Jews who lived in parts of Europe who fell under the influence of the infamous oppressor Hitler experienced greater danger than Jews who have ever experienced in exile. Some were killed, some were burned. It's amazing he writes this in the past. Some were killed, some were burned, some were stripped naked, and all suffered innumerable torments. The oppressor schemed to destroy the entire nation, God forbid, and due to our numerous sins, he succeeded in executing his plot against a significant majority of our people, as is well known. Only a minority survived. He's writing this in the past, that's what I understand, which is of itself a great miracle that Hashem performed for His nation. After all, that wicked man also gnashed his teeth at the few who remained, and they were in constant danger of falling into his trap, God forbid. We were in mortal danger more than once. I remember the fear and confusion that prevailed throughout Hungarian Jewry at the beginning of the summer when the evil oppressor Hitler urged the Prime Minister to solve the Jewish question here. This is going on in Hungary. Now listen, watch this because you don't know this part of the story. His solution to this question is well known: to send the Jews to an uninhabited land, or as the oppressors call it, deportation. And the outcome of this deportation was known to all, because by 1943 they understood there were death camps. This is what Hitler wanted to do to the Jews of this country, Hungary as well, and he urged and pressed the Prime Minister to acquiesce. Rumors spread that the Speaker of the Parliament, the Hungarian Parliament, was going to deliver a speech and express his opinion on this matter. Dread and great darkness fell upon all the Jews. We were in grave danger. All that was missing was the stroke of a pen, and Israel's verdict would be sealed, whether for the staff, God forbid, or for benevolence, whether we be punished or whether we be saved. Had Hashem not performed the great miracle on our behalf, we would all have perished. So they were about to come to a decision to accept that what Hitler had suggested, the final solution, should be carried out. He made the Prime Minister decide to solve the Jewish question as the evil oppressor requested, but only after the war. Somehow, someone got into their mind, so there was this pshara that the Prime Minister of Hungary said, yes, we'll deal with the Jews, first we got to win the war, not now. So ever since, which is why survived. The Hungarian Jews mainly survived until Germany made them change that even later. Ever since then, dread and fear hover over us. At the very moment I write these lines, now look at this. All the Hasidic rabbis of this country are making efforts to flee to Eretz Yisrael out of fear of the oppressor. And this is actually true. A lot of the rabbis ran away. And they left their flocks. This is one of the very parts of Jewish history they don't want to talk about. They ignore the fact that this causes Israel to despair. One can hear the masses complain, the Rebbe's are fleeing. What will be with us? The Medrash states that Elimelech was punished for this very reason. He fled at a time of trouble, which causing Israel to despair. So this is the situation he's facing in 1943. It's not about theology. It's not about argument. It's about practical. It's about tachlis. This is a time where we don't know what will happen when the war is over. What will happen to Hungarian Jewry? And as we know, in 1944, things turn around for Hungarian Jewry. And at the same time, even the Rebbe's who are opposed to Zionism are trying to run to Eretz Yisrael. They're trying to get smuggled out of the country. And there were ways to smuggle out individuals. And they were being smuggled out so they could survive and left behind all the Hasidim. There were other Rebbe's, by the way, who stayed. We have great faith that Hashem will save us from the oppressor. However, everyone knows that we were in mortal danger. We were in mortal danger before. Hashem saved us only with true miracles. Therefore, we must do so as our venerable patriarch taught. We must move away from here and go to Eretz Yisrael because our lives are in danger and one may rely on a miracle. So even if we survive this hell, he says, we got to get out of here because we survive only by a miracle. Now, after I've shown you, tell me, my dear friend, this is the guys who brought him the piece from the Shinova Rebbe, are the words of the Rebbe of Shinova that we must not go to Eretz Yisrael until Hashem delivers our pride and returns our captivity applicable today. On the contrary, we're not allowed to remain here any longer. Instead, we must take the initiative ourselves, and then Hashem will assist us as he did to Avraham Avinu. So the Rebbe of Shinova referred only to a time when Israel dwelt peacefully in exile, not to difficult times such as these. Just think about it. You surely heard what happened to the sacred and pious Rabbi Yeshayahu Krakover, the youngest son of the Rebbe of Tzanz and the brother of the Rebbe Shinova. He was hiding in Bechnia. Is this the place where he came from? Bechnia? Where'd you say it came from?
They came.
Passionate.
No. They came from. Where was it now?
You had a B. Didn't you say a B was a B? No. I don't know. Think about it.
It was Czechoslovakia.
Okay, so this is
Carpathian Mountains.
Okay, he was hiding.
Pishkov.
Okay.
Pishkov.
Okay. So he was hiding in Bachnia, which is near Krakow, with hundreds of thousands of other Jews. Meanwhile, okay. Krakow is Poland. Meanwhile, people here in the capital tried to save him and bring him here. They spent great sums of money to accomplish this, but time ran out, and all of them were killed and sanctified in the sanctification of God's name. O land, Eretz al Tachasi Damam, do not cover up the blood. Now the blood of tens of thousands of Jews that have been spilled. May their merit stand by us and help put us on to our travels. Now tell me, my friend, if the holy Rabbi Yeshayela, this leader who was killed, had an opportunity to escape from Bachnia to Eretz Yisrael, would the holy Rabbi of Shinova have said to him, what would he have said to him? Would he have insisted he remain here until Hashem raises our pride and returns our captivity? Undoubtedly, he would have answered, of course, do not stay here for an instant. Run for your life to Eretz Yisrael. For his statement in the Divrei Cheskel does not refer to times like this when lives are at stake. The same applies to us. Since we escaped danger miraculously, our situation is considered one of life and death. The story of Avraham Avinu demonstrates. Thus Hashem commands us to move far away from this dangerous place and go to Eretz Yisrael. Okay, before I read the end, let me just kind of comment and think for a moment. I think what he's trying to say is that maybe this is more of an emphatic kind of statement to say to this guy. If he starts arguing him with theology, it's not really going to be as effective as saying, practically speaking, you can't wave the Rebbe of Shinova to me now, because that was then. Even he would be running to Eretz Yisrael. He would be with the other Hasidic Rebbeim. We're trying to get out of Europe, being smuggled to Eretz Yisrael. So even he would agree to it. That's one part. The other part is, everybody agrees at one point, nobody was going to Eretz Yisrael. I mean, in the Middle Ages, nobody went to Eretz Yisrael.
Was going, but who?
Well, the groups went. The Ramban went. There was some Balei Tosana went. The Talmidim of the Gra go in the 1750s. Okay, that's a little bit after the Middle Ages. So these groups do go, but by and large, it was very difficult to go. What Rav Teichel argues, I guess, is that even if you couldn't go back then, the situation that in the late 1900s, the early 20th century, we were given the opportunity to have a land, and we didn't have to take it by force, and we were given permission for it, and we could develop it, and people could go, and there was nationalism in different countries that was now for the Jews as well, and we don't take the opportunity, it means we're missing the boat. And Allah has kama v'kama, God is showing us we missed the boat by bringing the Shoah upon us. That's his basic theme. So in other words, everybody agrees at one point it was difficult to Eretz Yisrael. When that change happens, Rav Techla says it happened already. The Shenova Rebbe says it's not going to happen until the time of Mashiach, and that's the real argument.
I have a problem. First, there's Pikuach Nefesh, so of course, so goes without saying.
What his argument is, even after they survive the war, they shouldn't stay there.
But second is him bringing the Abraham's case. That was a spiritual danger.
Yeah.
He was not a danger for his life.
Being in the furnace or custom was pretty much a physical danger. That was pretty dangerous. That was not good.
Yeah, but there was no oppression.
Yes, because in the Midrash, in the Midrashim, Avram was seen as a threat to the idol worship of Mesopotamia. He's put in the Ur Kasdim story does not appear in the Chumash; it appears in the Midrashim.
Right.
Why is he put in the Ur Kasdim? Why is he put in the fiery furnace? Because he's telling people not to worship idols. That's treason. So it was a threat. He moves on to Eretz Yisrael. It happens to be, by the way, that a lot of people are moving. There's a lot of movement going on in the Mideast at that point. People are moving away from Babylonia. Avram is one of many people who moves as well, but he moves because the Kadosh Baruch Hu tells him to, and because he's in danger to stay there. I'm not going to argue with you. You are right. Okay? I just think the point of the purpose is more drash, and making the analogy that even if you're in danger, you have to. That's the most important thing. Even if the danger subsides.
And also the Saba Rebbe stayed, and then when he left to Switzerland, not to Israel.
Wasn't so easy to get to Switzerland in the middle of the war.
But his main opponent now, theoretically, would be the Saba Rebbe.
Yeah. Okay, anyways, last piece of this, and then we'll take us to the end of chapter 3. This is piece that he wrote in Tikkun Olam, which I showed you when we were just introducing this Rav Teichel. I have heard that... I'm sorry?
Other handout?
I do, yes. Okay, it starts for next time. This should be the last page?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be the last page we'll get to today. Yeah, you're in the right place. I've heard that many people try to defame me because of a letter I wrote in Tikkun Olam, which was published by the Holy Rebbe of the Moon Country Rebbe, not the South Marais, my mistake. And that's true. That was printed in the early 30s. After all, in that letter, I spoke out against Aliyah, which is true. Well, now I advocate it. It's a 180-degree change. However, the preceding idea resolves the contradiction quite well. When I wrote the letter, and maybe that's why he kind of does practical as opposed to theological. When I wrote that letter, it was a time of peace and tranquility. We had not yet reached the state of mortal danger, and no lives were at stake. Now, however, times have changed. Therefore, the ruling has also changed, as the above-cited shalas demonstrates. Besides, so one is, first of all, things have changed very drastically, so I suddenly realized what's going on here. Second of all, and this is really the theology part of this, besides which, I already explained in the introduction that I had never delved deeply into this issue. Now, however, after examining this halacha in depth, I realized that I was mistaken. If you may remember, this happens when Pishtian, his yeshiva is taken away, his shul is destroyed, he's hiding in the shul, in the attic, watching from the cracks in the wood, seeing all the people being taken away, and he began to think, nobody's asking him shilas about chickens, no one's coming to him with questions in halacha, he's not writing response, he doesn't have his books. He began thinking about what's going on, and he had an opportunity to think about topics that he never really had an opportunity to think about, and suddenly came up with this idea about what's going on in the world. Now, however, after examining the halacha in depth, I realized I was mistaken. Therefore, I am emulating many of our Talmudic sages who admitted their mistakes and said, what I originally told you was mistaken. We've also find that the poskim sometimes retract rulings that they made previously. Okay, and therefore he writes this, and he's completing this on the 10 Days of Repentance in 1943. So you see the previous piece ends, chapter 3 ended on the 23rd of Elul. He's now writing this a few days right after Rosh Hashanah, which takes him up to the last chapter, which we're going to roll over to next time, which is really, not a very long chapter, but he talks about unity and peace in Israel's restoration. And in the end of that piece, do you remember why it's called Em HaBanim Chap3? Why is the book called Em HaBanim Chap3? What gave him the title? Which means, what's Em HaBanim Chap3 means? The mother, Em HaBanim, the mother of the children is Smecha. So of course he talks about really developing Eretz Yisrael, but he also mentions a story where there was a person who ran away with his daughters, and they were captured, and they would have a Pesach away from home, and the wife didn't know what happened to him, and finally when they came home, there was a complete other happiness of the wife who had been left behind, who didn't know what happened to her husband and children and daughter. So that's since she was the Em HaBanim Chap3. So in the first part he told the story. Now in the third and the fourth part he's going to say, I got to tell you something, the story I wrote you at the beginning was really me. about himself. So the Em HaBanim Chap3 is when he reveals what it is.
You?
Not me. Him. Not me. Him. That he himself ran away with his daughter. They were captured. They were held for Pesach. They didn't know if they'd get out. They smuggled across the border, and they finally were released because people paid a lot of money. And they were able to come back home. And the wife, his Rebbitzin, who gave up hope of never seeing her husband and daughter, was Em HaBanim Chap3. She was the Em HaBanim Chap3. So that comes up in this piece as well. We'll pick that up next time. Okay.
This answers it's nicely said.
But it's true. Okay? And back here in the ranch. In the sacred work, we're starting here, in the Sefer Ohev Yisrael by the Abda Rebbe, who was often called the Ohev Yisrael by the name of his book. He points out that the numerical value, the gematria of the word Ohev Yisrael equals the word takana, which means restoration. This demonstrates that loving one another is Israel's only means of restoration. So this would be something you would find in the Ohev Yisrael, because he wants to focus on, and the Ohev Yisrael was as his name is. The Abda Rebbe was a person who was an Ohev Yisrael. That's why he called his book what he did. The Medrash comments on this is like his preamble here. So as I told you, this can talk about all kinds of Ohev Yisrael. He's obviously going to focus on restoring Israel. The Medrash comments, Israel means Eretz Yisrael. The Medrash comments on the verse, he has worn away my flesh and my skin, he has broken my bones in Eicha. Chapter 3, he has worn away my flesh refers to the community, and my skin refers to the Sanhedrin. Just as the skin protects the flesh, so too the Sanhedrin protects Israel. He has broken my bones, Asmosai refers to the strengths, the Itzumi of the people, who are like the sons of the mighty Itzumim, and once again, this has been broken down. So we're talking about something which looks upon the Jewish people, and therefore he says it's really puzzling, how did Chazal apply this verse to the community, the Sanhedrin, and the great and mighty people of Am Yisrael? What did they mean? What is the Medrash trying to say that he's quoting from? It's Eicha Rabbati, chapter 3:2. Hashem enlightened me to understand their profound words. So he's going to give you his own idea, I guess, here. They intended to teach a practical lesson how to deal with the community in a way that will bring success and blessings. They also wanted to define the obligations of the leaders vis-a-vis the people and explain how they should lead and direct the people onto the true path that will bring them to perfection in all of their affairs. Okay, now he's going to tell you what this is all about. That's why it's a standalone chapter. I'll preface with an observation made by two prophets who prophesied in the same manner, who is Rav Shlomo Verga in the Sefer Shiftei Yehuda, and the scholarly Maram Shif both point out that this verse is inverted. In reality, first comes the skin, and then the flesh, and then the bones. So if you want to wear away something, what's the first thing that would wear away? Where you're going to get a skin abrasion is where the epidermis will get worn down. And then you go down to where the meat is, and then eventually you'll get down to where the bones are. So the verse seems to be backwards. Thus the verse should have begun with the skin and proceeded inwards. Instead, what does the pasuk say? First it wears away my flesh, and then my skin, and then my bones. It's not even going in an inverted order. It's out of order. First he should have worn away my skin and my flesh and broken my bones. In fact, what is the order? In other words, that is the order. The order is the other way around. Flesh, skin, and bones, when it really should have been skin, flesh, and bones. Alternatively, it should have begun with the bones and proceeded outward. But it's not. It's kind of all out of order. Now, however, there's no order. They suggested a tenuous answer, these two Sfarim. The God's plague is situated in the middle of the flesh. Sometimes it moves outward, as it says, and my skin, sometimes it enters inwards, as it says, he's broken my bones, and sometimes it moves inward and outward. So this is their pshat of what it means in this psukim. This pasuk talks about skin, flesh, skin, and bones. However, this does not explain why Yirmiyahu, the author of Eicha, specifically described the plague as beginning in the middle and spreading inwards and outwards. Why did he not describe it in the beginning in the skin, entering the flesh, and proceeding to the bones, as you find in the Torah when it says in Vayikra, where this talks about where there is a plague of tsaras. When a man will have in the skin of his flesh, it talks about skin and flesh. That's where the tsaras begins, the skin. It works its way through the skin into the flesh. Alternatively, why did he not describe it in the beginning in the bones and spread out into the skin, which is at least in order? Why was it what does it mean to be out of order? So it seems to me in the next paragraph there's a special reason for this. He wanted to hint to the reason we lost our land, the temple was destroyed, and we were exiled from our soil. All of this happened even though we were a strong nation, and all the inhabitants of the world feared us, as it says in Eicha, the kings of the earth and all the inhabitants of the world did not believe that the adversary and the enemy would enter the gates of Yerushalayim. No one believed it. What caused it to be? Lack of unity within the Jewish nation was the sole cause of the destruction. Had we been unified and undivided, no nation in the world would have conquered our land. But the plague of disunity broke out in our midst. We became segmented. Each faction fought with the other. What this one built, the other destroyed. This was chaos, as the history books describe and our sages allude to in the Talmud and the Medrash. And I'll talk about it in a moment. Thus, at that time, the plague came out in the very midst of Israel and spread inwards and outwards. Once the foundations were destroyed from within, the enemies from without were able to descend upon the Jews and conquer them, and they attacked them both within and without. So here's what he says as follows. He says the reason the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed was because, and you know this, sinas chinam. What sinas chinam mean? Baseless hatred. Baseless hatred means people couldn't get along together. They'd look for fights. So there was a lack of unity. They didn't have to agree with everything.
Kamsa bar kamsa.
It was kamsa bar kamsa. There was also the Bar Yonim, the Sikari, kind of burnt down the storehouses that were in Yerushalayim. There were storehouses that were of grain and produce that would have lasted for years, and they wanted to make a fight, to be a forceful fight to the death, and therefore they burnt down the storehouses. So they were forced to kind of move things on, accelerate them when they really weren't ready. So you have these two groups going back and forth. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, when he goes out to meet Vespasian, he has to be smuggled out of the city in a coffin.
Unbelievable.
Right? Because they knew they would never let him go out to have these kind of discussions. They were at loggerheads. So that's what means the history books talk about. What Chazal talk about is something more basic, which is the sinas chinam that grabbed at each member of the Jewish community. They were not united. So therefore, once the middle was ripped out, because they couldn't hang on together, then the outside and the inside comes collapsing down. That's what he's saying is the pasuk in Eicha that talks about the destruction of the Jewish people. Once the flesh was rotten in the middle, the skin breaks down and the bones come apart. If the middle of this, because he sees this as three layers: skin, flesh, and bones. When the flesh is ripped out, the center is corrupt, then the other sides kind of fall apart too.
This is his Kiddush.
This is his Kiddush in trying to explain this pasuk.
Do you think, guys, today the Jews are united or not? Because this is a deep discussion, Moshe, and this is a deep comment that he made.
Well, so
why aren't we? What is it about our ego? Is it the culture we're in? What is it that's taking us away from being together?
So I think he would agree that in his age people were not united either, and what he's hoping in this chapter is to bring people united together to work for Eretz Yisrael. I do believe that most Jews, even today, are united about the importance of Israel. Surely less so now than they were 20 years ago. There are more voices of dissent about Israel coming from the Jewish community, especially on the left, about Israel, and voices that don't support Israel like perhaps they should, voices that oppose Israel in very significant issues, but there's still, most Jews really still are together, you come together for Israel. Make a rally for Israel, you get Jews of all stripes. We hope. I believe you will. Thus, what you probably will not get, you probably get a lot of apathy. That's a bigger problem. Thus the prophet laments, he has worn away my flesh, that is to say, the plague came from the very midst of Israel, as the verse says, your ruiners and your destroyers will come forth from you. The chaos that arose in the camp of Israel caused the plague to eventually spread both outwards, my skin, and inwards, my bones. This is the meaning of the Medrash statement. He's worn away my flesh refers to the community. That is to say, the plague afflicted the community of Israel itself, because the three things he identified was the community, then the Sanhedrin, and the bones of the strong people. The Jews were torn apart into separate groups and factions, each one with its own methodology and ideology, and each group fought the other for the sake of its own ideology. Thus all law and order ceased from the land, and chaos reigned. This caused only misfortune and darkness in all of Israel's camps, and allowed the enemy to enter from without to destroy everything. There's always been this unity, right? What was the ship that they blew up? Ben Gurion blew up the Altaneta. Was that tough at the end? Altanea. Right. There's still a plaque on the beach of Tel Aviv where it took place. This was when they were trying to get everybody united together in one force in the Palmach, and Begin's group of the Irgun wanted to have their own form of army. With Jabotinsky, this is before actually Begin, when Jabotinsky, and they wanted to maintain their own force, and they were much more aggressive, and they were much more active, and much more offensive. And they wanted to keep it separately, and they brought in a boat, which they were to smuggle in arms and break through the British blockade. So actually Ben Gurion fired on the boat, and the boat sank, and Jews lost their lives. One of the sad moments in Jewish history. It was in sight of land, it was in the harbor itself. Well, it wasn't really a harbor, but in sight of the land, but it was just far enough outside that it could be sunk. So you had disagreements then, but everybody was working Laman Yisrael, just they had different ways of doing it.
It was not Begin, it was
Jabotinsky?
No, it was not Begin there. It was Begin. It was on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not him, it was a fight between the Jew.
Right.
Okay, say no, but we don't do it.
Correct. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but, and Ben Gurion viewed this as a test. I don't know. Sad moment in Jewish history, but it happened. This, 230. To page 230. This also explained the Medrash statement, "My skin refers to the Sanhedrin, just as the skin protects the flesh, so the Sanhedrin protects Israel. The members of the Sanhedrin, their capacity as leaders of the nation, must unify the people. And just as the skin unifies and covers all parts of the flesh, so too the leaders must try with all their might to unify all parts of the nation and make them into a single society." That's what the Medrash says, that the skin... flesh is the community. The skin is the Sanhedrin, which protects the community. Thus, the Jewish nation will survive, flourish, and blossom to the highest heights, and there will be no adversity, satan, or misfortune. If, however, the leaders do not strive to unify the nation, they will cause the plague to spread to the community and to themselves as well. They will lose their influence over the people. The foundations will be destroyed. Everything will wear away, etc., etc. He has worn away my flesh, refers to the community. Afterwards, my skin, which is Sanhedrin, will also lose its place. And finally, he has broken my bones, refers to the strength of the people. That is to say, even the great and mighty people who were destined to help the nation will be broken and lost without bringing any benefit to the generation. This actually occurred at that time. Disunity caused destruction and exile and continues to cause the exile to persist, for the Satan still dances among us. And we have it in 1943, he's writing. The leaders will eventually suffer the consequences for this. And because they do not attempt to unify the Jewish nation into a single society, this is the only cure for our ailments, as Chazal have stated, to come together and be unified. Okay, before his death, this is Beis, Rav Baruch Ber of Mezerich told the students, "My children, stay together, then you will survive and move forward and not backwards." Chas v'chalila. A hint of this is the fact that the Torah says, "He is one, and who can turn him back?" I don't recall the pasuk in Eov in Hebrew. The same lesson applies to our nation as a whole. A certain poet expressed beautifully what he said about Israel. I don't know who this poet is, and actually it doesn't say it in the footnotes. My fortunate and wretched nation, you are fortunate when you're unified, you're wretched when you're divided, you're weak and you're divided, you're strong when your desires are one. My fortunate and wretched nation, you are wretched because of your abundant factions, for abundant factions are a curse of your tents. You're fortunate when you're united, with unity is a death blow to your enemies. Upon your factions lie the slain. I've got to go look this up in the Hebrew, what it really was. Destroy your factions, raise up your walls, and gird your loins with iron to become united. Then you'll rise, become established, and stand forever. I don't know who this poet actually is, but he brings, of course, the fact that disunity destroyed the Jewish people. I later discovered in Gimel that everything I said above is stated clearly in Yirmiyahu's lamentation. This is in Eicha itself. That the kings of the earth and all the inhabitants of the world did not believe the adversary and the enemy would enter the gates of Jerusalem. It was for the sins of her prophets, the iniquities of her priests. And Rashi explains what was the sin. This calamity occurred because the sins of her false prophets. For they quarreled, kinatsu, and also wandered gamna'u. The nations will no longer fear. The anger of the Lord has divided them. So the division was what actually caused it, according to Rashi's interpretation of this verse in Yirmiyah, in Eicha. You don't need his own interpretation. Rashi seems to be alluding to it. And here he explains. The commentaries interpret the words kinatsu parallel to when men shall fight, ki natsu. When two people fight together, when they fought one another thereupon, therefore gamna'u means they became shaky, they became not steady, and their existence crumbled beneath them. And the nation said, when the nations heard the Jews were fighting and even killing each other, they said that they will no longer fear. That is to say, at first they didn't believe they could conquer Israel, for it was a strong nation, but now the nation said they will no longer fear the Jewish people, because the anger of the Lord has divided them. Hashem's anger divided them into many parts, thereby weakening them. This all happened because of the sins of our prophets and iniquities of our priests, means the sins of the leaders who didn't unify them. They didn't make sins, really means the sin was they lost their opportunity, didn't make them into a single society. So once again, the same idea that the disunity caused the destruction of Churban Abayis. A certain wise politician put it this way. I don't know who this politician is. This sounds like a wise statement. I don't know if it's a politician. Disunity of a nation is its downfall. Anybody know who would have said that? No idea. Yerushalmi states as follows. Rabbi Yochanan Mitarta said, we find that the first temple was destroyed because the Jews committed the three cardinal sins, idolatry, adultery, and murder. But at the time of the second temple, we know that they studied Torah, diligently observed mitzvot meticulously, and possessed all the great character traits. So why were they exiled? Because they loved money and hated one another. Sinat chinam, and groundless hatred is worse than the three cardinal sins. The Gemara says the Masechet Yomog says, the Medrash says it, in other places even more forcefully. The Yerushalmi points out that the sin of jealousy, which existed at the time of the second temple, caused greater destruction than the sin sins of the first temple era. The enemies only destroyed the ceiling of the first temple while the walls remained, because the ceiling was made of wood, the walls were made of stone. When it came to the second temple, however, they destroyed and demolished even the walls and foundations, as it says, raise it down to its foundations, destroyed completely. So according to this Medrash, it really seems to say the first Beis HaMikdash, some of the building remained that they were able just simply to restore for the second Beis HaMikdash. I did not know that until I saw that in his Medrash. The Yerushalmi concludes, any generation that does not witness the rebuilding of the temple is considered as if they destroyed it. That is to say, if we didn't get to build the Beis HaMikdash and rebuild it in our days, since the Satan still dances among us in the form of groundless hatred and jealousy, as Jeff pointed out, we still have this unity. We cause the exile to continue and the temple to remain in ruins. Therefore, it's considered like we destroyed it. We haven't changed anything. And we can derive from this that those who find excuses to arouse jealousy, hatred, and disunity destroy the entire edifice of Israel, even if they study Torah and observe mitzvot. Wow. They destroy the foundation of Israel's existence and cause the exile to persevere. David HaMelech said about them, when the foundations are destroyed, and what has the righteousness man accomplished? What good is his righteousness and divine service if the deeds cause Israel's foundation existence to be destroyed? Hashem should help us coexist with love and brotherhood and so forth and so on. So in other words, once again, it's all about this unity. None of this has come yet to talk about the land of Israel. He's talking about the destructive nature of this unity. Okay, Dalet. Chazal.
About the second Beit HaMikdash built, there's one layer of wood, two layers of stone. This instruction from Kosh. Don't build only stone, because if any time we want to destroy it, it's easy for destroy.
So the lower layer was of wood. I think no. The middle layer?
This always go to one wood, two stone. One wood, two stone.
Okay, it was intermingled. So yes, is that in the Tanakh or that's in the Medrash?
It's in I think it's when you give the
I recall that. I don't know if it's in the Tanakh or the Medrash or the Gemara says it. In other words, but what he's saying is that Koresh required them to build it with wood in the middle, between the different layers. So if he ever wanted to rescind his permission and wanted to redestroy the Beis HaMikdash, the whole thing would come down.
Yeah.
And therefore, when the Beis HaMikdash was finally destroyed in year 70 and the conflagration took place, the fire took hold, it burnt the building down. Whereas the first building was made of completely stone, it was just a roof that was made of wood. Excellent. Good. The Chazal state that when the Jewish people are united, no nation can rule over them. So I'm talking about disunity, the destructiveness. Now he talks about unity in a positive nature. Hashem helped me discover the true and novel interpretation of this based on Rabbi Moshe Yeres' interpretation of the verse. Like a muddy fountain in a polluted spring, so is the righteous man who bows before the wicked, in Mishlei. He explains that a fountain, who says this? Rabbi Moshe Yeres. He explains that a fountain clouded with mud and other substances will eventually clear up. The impurities will settle to the bottom, leaving the upper waters clear. Similarly, a righteous man who bows before the wicked will eventually become pure and rise to the top. Wow. While the wicked one will fall to the bottom. The stories of Pharaoh and Israel and Mordechai and Haman prove this, that the righteous eventually get to the top. Sometimes we don't see this in our day-to-day lives, but Tvach Aroch we do. In the stories of Jewish history, we do see this in Pharaoh and with Haman. According to Rabbeinu Bechaye, so this is how he interprets the pasuk in Mishlei. It's actually meant to be a positive statement, because you normally read the pasuk in Mishlei like a muddied fountain and a polluted spring is the righteous man who bows before the wicked. You would normally say the person who bows before the wicked has messed things up. He's like a fountain of water that got messed up. It's got ruined, it's got sullied. But according to Rabbeinu Bechaye, it's the other way around. According to Rabbeinu Bechaye, claim that this is true only if the waters of the fountain of spring are calm and quiet, and dwell peacefully within one another without moving from their place. Then the pure and clear waters will rise to the top, while the intermingled impurities will settle to the bottom. That's true. Any settling tank will show you that. However, if the waters move from place to place and fight each other, they will make themselves cloudy. If the water is shaken around, for when the different particles of water move and fight, they stir up the mud that has already fallen to the bottom. The same is true of the Jewish people. If they dwell together peacefully, the wicked people fall to the bottom and the righteous go to the top. But if they fight and disunite the intermingled substance, the sinners of Israel will be stirred up, the fountain will become cloudy, and the wicked ones will rise to the top. So the mixing together is mixing the good and the bad. So I guess if you keep fighting with the wicked people in Israel, and now he's changing this, it's not Haman and Paro, this is the wicked people in Israel, things still stay muddy. Accordingly, Esther had this in mind when she warns Mordechai. Therefore, Lech Kenosis Kol HaYedim, gather all the Jews together in chapter 4 in Esther. Make sure they all gather together. What do you mean, like, bring them together? Not just get together for prayers and fasting. Make sure they gather together with love and affection and mutual respect. Avas Chinam. Then they will be purified and rise to the top, and the wicked Haman will bow before the righteous Mordechai. Mordechai, the other way around, not Mordechai for Haman. They did this and immediately felt its effects. Haman began to fall, as Zeresh said, Nafal tipol lefanov, you've begun to fall, you will surely fall further and further down. This happened, why? Because when the water is calm, it clears and rises top. When there's unity of the Jewish people, we can defeat the Hamans. This is what Chazal means when they say that no nation can rule against the Jews as long as they are united. For then, the following verses will be fulfilled. The righteous one falls 7 times, yet rises, while the wicked one falls but once and never gets a chance to get up again. So unity can help the Jews be successful. Thus, the leaders of Israel have a foremost obligation to strive with all their might to make peace within Israel, help the Jews live together in love and unity. Observe how Chatzam Sofer explains the verse, the people that survived the sword found grace in the desert when Israel goes out of its place of rest. Excuse me. I explained elsewhere, writes the Chatzam Sofer, that strife disbands a settlement and makes it into a desert. Furthermore, it's been said that strangers in a foreign land live together very peacefully. Therefore, the prophet says with bewilderment, the people who survived the sword should love one another. But behold, they didn't. They found grace being a desert, disunited because of strife. Then Israel goes to its place of rest. It goes, in its present tense, as if to say Israel, which first the Torah scholar appointed over the Jews, should continually seek out a place of rest for the Jewish people and engender peace and tranquility, which didn't actually happen. His words are especially relevant today, for we indeed the people who survived are the people who survived the sword. For we indeed the people who survived the sword. I missed the word here somewhere. We escaped the sword of the oppressors that have consumed hundreds of thousands of Jews. Of course, what he writes is not really correct. Will not be correct. He's saying at that point the Hungarian Jews have actually escaped the bullet, so to speak. But Hashem has protected us. Therefore, we, the last remnants, should love one another and remove anything that causes disunity. If we want to defeat the enemy, the Hitler, we have to be united together. We should not provoke one another back as one man with one heart. The Torah scholars who are appointed over the various communities, the different kilot, must strive to achieve this goal, as Chatam Sofer explained. So therefore, I'm a leader, and you're a leader, everybody's leadership has to work to get the Jews together in Hungary, because by coming together, we will be able to defeat Hitler and his scum. The holy Rebbe of Sanz was fond of telling over a wonderful parable. Once there was a man, I heard this parable, I didn't know it came from the Rebbe of Sanz. Once there was a man who lost his way in the vast desert. For many years, he was unable to find the path that would lead him to an inhabited city. He wandered to and fro, and he saw an elderly man coming his way. He was overjoyed, for he thought this man would certainly lead him out of the terrible desert. He asked the elderly man, "From where do you come and where are you going?" and told him that he himself had been wandering in this awful desert for many days, unable to find his way into the city. He begged the person he met to have compassion and lead him into the path of righteousness and save him from the labyrinth. And the old man whom he just met responded, "Guess what? The same thing happened to me. I too have been lost in this desert, not only for many days, but for many years, during which time I became old. I have yet to find a path leading out of this vast desert. My lot is no better than yours, but allow me to make a suggestion. Let us not take the paths we have already taken. They certainly do not lead to the path of life, for we have yet to reach our destination. Rather, we must seek out a new path and walk in it together, for two are better than one. Then we can hope to attain our goals with God's help." So the response is, A, don't go back to the old ways. Break out into a new path. Don't go where you came from, because you know where you came from is not the way out. And second of all, work together, come together, the two of us, and try to create a new path that will work together in unity together. That's what the Tzanzer Rebbe was saying. The same applies to our generation. Our enemies gathered us into a fiery furnace and annihilated the majority of our Jewish brethren in Egypt. The few remnants are like in Europe, thank you. Jewish brethren in Europe. The few remnants like a brand, like a hot coal saved from a fire, and the people who survived the sword. Behold, we now realize the path we took thus far in this lengthy exile did not lead us to our desired destination. It's full of strife, disunity, and factionalism, and groundless hatred. Sinas chinam. It only led us to destruction. The Ramah writes that he saw several communities destroyed by dissension, by machlokas. Many communities, many countries that once housed thousands of holy communities, large and small, are now desolate and destroyed. The paths of Zion are mourning. All of this can only be distributed through the abundance of strife in Israel. That's the theological reason. He's leaving, by the way, he's not talking about the fact that we didn't go to Israel. He's talking about the internal strife amongst ourselves. That's why this is a standalone kind of chapter. The Noda Yehuda wrote to Rabbi Moshe Hamburger that there is no such thing as a dispute for the sake of heaven today. The Pirkei Avos talks about a machlokas l'shem shemayim and a machlokas shelo l'shem shemayim. In Pirkei Avos, it says, what's an example of machlokas for the sake of heaven? The machlokas of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. The two of them argue back and forth on every page of the Talmud. This is for the sake of heaven. What's an argument for not for the sake of heaven? Korach Vadatzal. The machlokas of Korach against Moshe, that's an argument for honor, for grandeur, for personal aggrandizement. That's not for the sake of heaven. So writes the Noda B'Yehuda in the 1700s, he writes in the letter to Rav Isaac Hamburger, he says that, you know what, today in the Oh, that's a blackout. Okay, there we go.
Still have light.
We still have light. Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
but we cannot read.
I can read. Okay?
Can you read?
I'm going to read
Oh,
until my eyes pop out. Okay. Now, so in other words, today he said in the 1700s we have no light we have no dispute, no machlokas l'shem shemayim. Now, if he wrote this in his generation in 1750 about, which is still learned, what are we, orphans of orphans, to say? So now, if he wrote that in the 1700s and nothing's gotten better, what can we say about ourselves? That there is no machlokas l'shem shemayim. All these people who are arguing back and forth, the different communities, the different chassidim who are arguing amongst themselves, each has got their own rebbe, and he's of course going to focus eventually about going to Israel. All this machlokas is really not l'shem shemayim. Therefore, we, the few remaining survivors of the sword, must follow the Khatam Sofer's advice. We must mediate peace between ourselves, bring people close to one another, and strengthen our unity. We must begin. I'm sorry, my eyes are going. We must begin I skip a life. We must begin a completely new life and break away from our old shackles of disunity. We must live unified lives with common goals. We must gather all the remaining strength of our nation's last remnants and live as one man with one heart. Then Hashem will help us rebuild the ruins and establish ourselves firmly in the world. We will not forget we will not no longer be a disgrace among the nations. Hashem will place His Shekhinah in our midst and protect us. I'm still going to go on until my eyes stop. Okay. I think we can. What time is it now? We can do. Let's do at least till next page. Okay. I don't know if we need to finish Zion, but let's do this page. So, do not wonder how all the different segments of Israel can possibly be included in one unit. How can people who are so disparate get together? Now he's going to make the bridge into talking about how you get the people together, which is of course really working. He's going to eventually lead this working for Israel. I'll answer that Mordechai and Esther also gathered all the Jews together as one. Now, do you think that all the Jews of Mordechai's generation had the same convictions? They too had differences of opinion, and many of them were even assimilated. Open your eyes and see that the Medrash describes how Mordechai begged the Jews, them not to defile themselves with the king's food, since the feast was not compulsory. Nevertheless, 18,000 Jews ignored the tzaddik and defiled themselves with prohibited foods and abominable acts that took place in the first Mishnah and the opening lines of Megillat Esther. This demonstrates that they too had diverse opinions. Not everybody was religious in the days of Mordechai. Not everybody liked Mordechai. Nonetheless, when a general decree was issued among the entire Jewish nation, irrespective of whether they were devout Jewish observers or sinners, they understood that gathering all of Klal Yisrael into one unified entity was the only remedy for this affliction. All Jews had to unite, from the most extreme leftists to the most extreme righties, without differentiating between various types. Thus Esther says, gather all the Jews together. Just as the affliction came upon all of Israel, the remedy had to come by uniting all of Israel. Therefore, she specifically said all the Jews, and without distinguishing between the various different types. This is exactly what Mordechai said. Why are there no emergency lights on in this place? That's not a good thing. This is exactly what Mordechai did.
the lights, the window.
No, the emergency light should pop on.
Right.
But the school have to work that. This is exactly what Mordechai did. He succeeded in uniting the Jews because they cared about the troubles of the generation and grieved over Israel's fallen glory. He paid attention to the Zohar, the Talmud, the Midrashim, which stated that we must love and befriend every single Jew, even the greatest sinners, for they too are the offspring of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. He befriended them and showed them love until he was able to influence them, and slowly but surely to repent and accept the Torah anew. The author of the Eshkol HaKofer concurs with this in his interpretation of the verse. Ki Mordechai Yehudi Mishneh LaMelech Achashverosh v'Ratzui l'Rov Achav was accepted by the multitude of his brethren. He sought the good of his people.
Not all of them.
Right, but not all of them. He explains that Mordechai became, but that's true. But however, he was still accepted by most. You never hit 100%. You never hit 1,000. You never bet 1,000.
Rov
Achav. True, the people did not really like the politician, but he became involved in their concerns and tried to make peace in between them. He assisted them and spoke to them kindly. He also taught them true beliefs. But he did all this with a gentle reply, without shouting and with a screaming. One more paragraph. We learn from this the above that when adversary strikes all of Israel, we must likewise bring all the Israel together in peace. Only then Hashem will send us relief and salvation. In chapter 3, which we just finished last time, I discussed this at length and proved that our redemption depends on uniting all these streams within the Jewish nation. I also proved that we are capable of doing so, and that our joint effort in rebuilding land is the force that will unify us. Therefore, it is unnecessary to repeat it here, because I've already spent all this time talking about it. But now I'm going to talk about how we get the Jews together. And he's going to pick up more as we get together next time to do this here. But he's leading, once again, the idea is that this is really a chapter that talks about creating unity, but the unity is really, he feels he can get the Jews together by working on this Israel project, which he was prescient, he was prophesizing this, because he never got to really see that, but the truth didn't bring the Jewish people together.
It's interesting, I was reading a book, page
236, the first new paragraph in 236. It's not a beginning of a new letter. Okay, but he's talking about trying to bring everybody together. He says even Mordechai and Esther had trouble getting everybody together. However, people disregarded him, but he managed to get everybody together and he reached out to them. And Mordechai, we just did this now a little bit about what Mordechai did. People didn't really like Mordechai. Mordechai even reached out to the people who went to the Suda with Achashverosh. They were not really committed. So therefore we have to reach out to Jews even who are not completely 100% committed Jews. So here in the chapter dealing with unity, I simply want to reinforce what I wrote above and demonstrate that our Father in heaven wants us to unite. The Shalah writes, a Shalah called the Shnei Luchot Brit by Rav Horowitz, by Rav Yeshayahu. I think Yeshayahu is his first name, if I'm not mistaken, yes? Writes, and he has a lot of Kabbalah in the Sefer Shalah. And by the way, I think there's a translation of the Shalah that's out now. I'm not sure if it's a good translation. The Shlach Kadosh on the Parsha may be translated, and we're called the Assembly of Israel, Knesset Yisrael, because we're all assembled united in the secret of Hashem's unity. Therefore, we must put an end to quarreling and controversy within Israel. And the Shlach continues in his way, writes, quote, "The worst thing in the world is dissension. It's even worse than idolatry." Wow. Chazal stated that Achav's generation won its wars, even though the people were idolaters. Achav was one of the worst idol worshippers as a king, because there was peace and harmony among them. Shaul's generation, on the other hand, lost its wars, even though people were guiltless. They were, they followed Hashem, because there were slanderers among them who instigated arguments against each other. The secret of this matter, as I explained above, we, the Assembly of Israel, united in the secret of the genuine one. Thus, when there is a strife below, there is division and disunity above, and the cutting of the shoots. In other words, if we are disunited, then we can't be united with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is one. Therefore, he who yearns for the Shekhinah should flee from the filth of the serpent, and stay far away from even the slightest hint of discord. But why must I describe how disgraceful strife is when all the holy books are filled with such descriptions? Just remember this rule. The sin of disunity and dissension, sin askinim, is worse than the sin of idolatry, as we find by Achav and Shaul. Chazal also state the Holy One, blessed be He, pardoned the sin of idolatry 3 times, but He did not forgive the sin of discord. This is taken from the Medrash Lamed. I guess he's quoting, the Shlomo is quoting this Medrash. Hence, my friends and brothers, do not believe those who attempt to break Israel's cohesiveness by saying this is impossible. It's impossible and dangerous to unify all segments of Israel. Even if they are right and there is some danger involved, Hashem prefers that the Jewish people be unified, united, and not separated. So in other words, theoretically, if you feel that you are going to keep separate, that's not the right thing to do. In reality, there's no danger at all. Don't be afraid to be involved with non-religious, because then they'll pull you away. On the contrary, if the ultra-Orthodox Jews would draw closer to the religious would come close to us and incline their hearts to the good. Pardes Yosef cites from Avot Rabbi Natan that many Jewish sinners produce righteous, pious, and upright offspring because they drew close to Torah scholars. We trust Chazal and the Shalom more than those who separate the united people, no matter who they are, even if they are important individuals. In addition, the people of our generation can be influenced to do good, for they went through an iron furnace. And those who survived, you saw them at the Holocaust, his Holocaust, our Holocaust. And those who survived with God's help emerged purified and softened. Also, the Shalah asserts with Israel's unity is God's unity. It's always fascinating when I read this. He talks about the Holocaust as if it's over. He doesn't realize that the worst is yet to come. And he's writing this once again in 43, 44, and it's not over. And the author of Tshuva Me'ava writes, if the only way to build the big Mikdash is through strife, it is preferable not to build it. Thus, when it is possible to rebuild our Holy Land, which is the first step in redemption, and in this way expedite the rebuilding of the temple, which depends on Israel's unity, it is surely imperative to unify all of Israel, prevent strife, and build our land as one. Mari Ansel, I don't know who that is, Besides the following in the name of the Maharal, this Maharal of Prague. It is well known that Hashem's name is peace, shalom, and his seal is truth, emes. Now, which is closer to a man, his name or his seal? Everyone certainly agrees that a person's name is closer to his essence than his seal. The same is true of Hashem. His name is Shalom, is more important to him than his seal, which is truth. So Shalom is more important than truth. Wow, that's fascinating. Therefore, we must forego the truth, which is merely God's seal, and pursue peace, which is His name. This concludes Maharal.
We see that when you have peace between husband and Hashem change the world.
Correct.
It's not true.
True. Right. Correct. And we say, "Osa Shalom B'Ramav Hu Yasa Shalom Aleinu." We're saying that Shalom is the name of Hashem. That is Hashem's name, by the way. I think I once told you that did I ever tell you this? When I got married, I wanted to buy a floor mat. So I went into a mocher svar, and I went to a gift shop. I'm embarrassed to tell the story. I went into a gift shop, and I was feeling really proud. We wanted to make a Jewish home and all that. And I said, I've seen these like Shalom floor mats. I'd like to have a Shalom floor mat when people walk in. Yeah, I told you a story, and the guy said to me, "Why do you want to step on God's name when you walk into your house?" That's probably because he didn't have one to sell me, okay? But he's really true. This is...
It's like when you walk up the street and you say Shabbat Shalom. They say Good Shabbos. They don't want to mention Shalom. That's God's name.
So that's possible. That's right. They don't mention God's name before they've actually prayed to God.
Right.
That's true. That's correct. So Hashem's name is Shalom. Okay, anyways, I found a manuscript written by a great man. He doesn't know who this is because the manuscript is missing the first page, which explains the verse. This is a bit of a drash here, part chet. This is when Yaakov goes and separates the sheep between Lavan. So he takes Hatufim, the feeble sheep went to Lavan, Vahakshurim, and the ones that were strong went to Yaakov. It's well known that Yaakov's defining quality was truth, emes. It says, Titin emes liYaakov, give truth to Yaakov. Emes goes to Yaakov. The word emes consists of letters that are very distant from one another, as the Talmud points out. You've heard this, some of you have heard this. The Aleph and the Taf are on the two extremes of the alphabet, and Mem is in the middle. Aleph, Mem, Taf is Emet, so this is the beginning, end of the alphabet, and the Mem, and exactly the halfway point. But truth joins them all together. Obviously, in the opposite, by the way, is Sheker, which is... Sheker is actually the letters together at the end, Shin, Kuf, Reish. Right before the end. The other part, by the way, about Emet and Sheker is Emet, all the letters are flat. They all stand on two legs. They all have two legs to stand on. They're very solid. And the Shin, Kuf, Reish all come to a point. Because Sheker is... No, the old Shin, the Shin in the Sefer Torah.
Shin Sfaradi is straight.
The Sephardi, that's correct. Well, that shows you should be an Ashkenazi. The Sephardi Shin is straight. But even the Sephardi...
The beginning is okay.
No, even the Sephardi Shin, which is flat, the angle comes on the end. I don't know if people know what I'm talking about. The shin you see in the Sefer Torah, it's a pointy shin. Yes?
Yes.
But the Sfaradim will tell you that their shin is written with more flat on the bottom, but the end comes down to an end at the very end.
Okay. Well,
you get
that's the spirit of unity.
Spirit of unity. Let me get away with it. But that's really so. Even the Sephardi shin does come to a point, a little bit of a point. That point is missing. It's not a kosher shin. Even the Sephardim. This demonstrates that the attribute of truth has the power to join even the most opposite extremes. Even though the aleph is on the rightmost extreme and Taf on the leftmost, and the middle is the middle letter, joins them together. It's well known the letter Mem is made of the letter Chaf and Vav. Wow. So I'm telling you, it's a drash here. As the Beit Yosef explains, these two letters numerically equal the tetragrammaton, the Shem Havaya, the Yud K Vav K, which is 26. So Mem, which is the middle of the alphabet, is made of a Chaf and a Vav, which is the gematria of 26, which is the gematria of the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. Hinting to the fact that when we arrive at to bring the two extremes together, Hashem assists us. He wants to unify the two extremes. Therefore, His seal is truth, is emes. So God's seal is truth. His name is Shalom. The Shalah writes. I told you, drash. She's running out things to write a thing. The Shalah writes the truth alludes to unity, as the Pope says. His seal is truth to demonstrate that He is one. This is where probably from Tehillim. Where's 49 from? I don't know. Okay.
Saying it's before.
He's quoting from the Shlah, correct, but I'm following the Akshay Pasuk. This was also Yaakov Avinu's quality to join and bind everyone together, even those who were distant and from each other. This is the meaning of the verse, and Vakshurim Yaakov, the strong ones to Yaakov. Yaakov would bind the kasher and join everyone together, for holiness is the domain of unity. So he's combining the strong sheep, the idea of the kasher, to connect people. Those who follow this path are the part of Yaakov's camp. Thus the kshurim, those who bind people together, belong to Yaakov. The same word kshurim, which refers to the sheep that were strong is the same idea to bind people together. If you are going to bind yourself to others, you are strong. But the atufim, which either means the ones who are enwrapped or the ones who are weak in the story of Yaakov, those who attempt to disunite the united ones and who enwrap their words in pious wrappings belong to Lavan's camp. It's a real drash. For Lavan, I'm not making fun, I'm just saying you have to understand it's not pshat. For Lavan attempted to act pious, even more pious than Yaakov, and therefore people who act pious but are not really pious are not as much as honest as Yaakov is. We see this misstatement to Yaakov as Lavan says, Lo yesa kain bim kamenu, such is not done in our place to give the younger before the older girl. Lavan brought destruction to the world through this piety. In other words, the whole idea that we had this unity among the Jewish people came about because Rachel became the younger of the two. Rachel was how to go. If he would have married Rachel first, he would have only had one wife. He wouldn't have had this unity among all the brothers. Lavan brought destruction to the world through this piety. The Kabbalists explained that had Rachel been given to Yaakov first, he would have born the 12 godly tribes from her. Then the world would have immediately reached perfection. We would not have been subjected to our Egyptian or any other exile. Lavan caused our current exile by tricking Yaakov and attempting to be more pious than him. Similarly, those who attempt to be pious, causing dissension while unwrapping their ways in pious wrappings, belong to Lavan. They caused destruction, damage to Israel, just as Lavan did. Rav Pinchas, of course, was known to possess Ruach HaKodesh and receive revelations from Eliyahu. In Medrash Pinchas, his disciple writes, the last summer before he died, he said that Israel must abandon all dissension, so no Jew will be disunited. This implies we must disunite. We must not disassociate from even the most corrupt and lowly Jews. They're also Jews, as the Talmud said, even if Yisrael af b'shachata Yisrael hu, even if a Jew sins, he's still a Jew. So once again, again and again and again and again, coming uniting ourselves. Right, when we unite, this is the next intent. Chazal expounded the verse, Hein el kabir v'leimas, kabir koach leiv. Behold, God is mighty, he does not despise, he is mighty in strength of heart. From where do we learn that the Holy One, blessed be He, does not despise the prayers of the community? It says, Kain kel kabir v'leimas, God is mighty, he does not despise. Seemingly, the Talmud cites the verse incorrectly. It doesn't say, lo yimas, it says lo yimas. It really says, and he does not despise, with the vav in the mid. It doesn't say hein keil kabir lo yimas, but lo yimas. In Shivrei Luchot, the Ramav Pano, who's a Baal Kabbalah, explains this in Talmudic style. The first mighty of the verse praises the omnipresent. The second mighty praises the community. So you have, what's the pasuk say? Behold, God is mighty, he despises. He is mighty in the strength of a heart. So the second mighty praises the community when they are united. The mighty heart refers to prayer. The Talmud only mentions one mighty in order to be brief, and omits the vav in order not to interrupt this idea. It is, as the Talmud states, Hein Kel Et kabir lo yilmaz. God does not despise the mighty. So he's trying to break apart the pasuk and give a drash. Not God. God is mighty, but God is not despising the mighty who become united by the prayers of the community. That's simple. Not so simple to me. Now, the repetition of mighty in the verse is similar to the repetition of He will bless, Yivarech in the pasuk. The Lord remembers will bless, He will bless. In Tehillim, both of these words, Yivarech and Kabir, have the same numerical value, okay, which equals 232, and these are 4 expansions of Tetragrammaton. I'm not going to go through that. It's a big long footnote. It's really complicated. When the people of Israel united, they are in the name of God, blessed be He. So what he does is he tries to take all the letters of each of these words. Just to tell you in short what he does, the word, for example, Kabir, the Kaf is 20, Beis is 2, Yud is this, and add them all together, and I forget how he comes up with this, but somehow he brings this to be equal to all the names of Hashem in the different ways that Yud K, Vav K can be written out. I'm going to leave it out because I couldn't understand when I read it the first time fully. Now I understood it and I tried to go back and make sense of it. I know what it is. How do you spell out the Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey? Do you spell right? How do you spell out Hey? Is Hey, Hey, Hey? Right? But there's also a misbar in the type of gematria that you take numerical equivalent of every letter that makes up the letter. So that Yud is not 10, Yud is Yud, Vav, and Dalid. Mm-hmm. Hey is not 5, Hey is Hey and Hey. Vav is Vav and Vav. Okay.
Maybe Hey and Aleph.
But Hey may be Hey and Aleph, correct. So, in other words, there are different ways to write Hey. You can write Hey with a Hey, 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 Hey. You can write Hey with Hey Yud. You can write Hey with Hey Aleph. So that gives you different permutations. That's why he tries to say, depending on how you write the word Hey, And even the Vav is going to be written in different ways. Is Vav, 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 or Vav, Aleph, Vav. So he comes up with different kinds of numeration, and that comes together. And that's really what he writes in the next paragraph, and he writes in the paragraph afterwards. And I'm just going to kind of elide over this because it's very, very confusing, and we're just going to lose the tree because of the thickets. Okay? All right? So I think I'm going to move to Yud Aleph with your permission, okay? So no, but basically he's trying to find some kind of drush al pi Kabbalah about uniting people together.
So what you want to find all these Matthew, Yud, K, Vav, K.
He tries to come up that all of them, if you add, come up to different ways, and if you add up each of these letters, I don't remember anymore. I don't remember how he came up to this. We add up all the different ways to write the Yud K Vav K, the way to spell out the letters of the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. You come out with 72, 63, 45, and 45 and 52, which equals 232. And the gematria of Yivarech and the gematria of Kabir is equal to 232. That's what he tries to say. Okay, so therefore that shows that if you're united, you bring the power of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay.
Interesting.
Okay, it's a very convoluted kind of thing, and I'm not sure that the book really stands on it. And did you ever understand how I got to this? Now, if you go down below, you'll see how he adds up all the different ways to add up the letters of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name. You come up with these different numbers. If you add up all these numbers, 75, you end up with 232. So the four different ways that you can spell out each of the letters of the Shem Hashem equals these four, which together equals 232, and the gematria of Yovarech and Kabir equals 232 each of them. So therefore, by being strong and by being united, you are therefore representing the name of Hashem. It's a very long drash that kind of it's hard for me to accept literally, but it's another point, another part of what he's trying to explain in terms of how coming unity really supports HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
But is that the case? Can you substitute one for the other?
Basically, this is a form of gematria.
You can do what you want.
It's a form of gematria that says I take up the value not of the letter, but how I write each letter out.
And if it doesn't work, then you say +1.
No, but I'm saying, in other words, it works. It's like you got to really be into gematria to make it work. I told you, like the Yud is Yud Vav Dalet. So don't look at Yud as 10. Look at Yud as really equal to 10 plus 6 plus 4 is really 20. Right? Hey is either Hey or Hey Aleph. So all the letters are going to be, you take the components that make up the letter and add those components together. There are different forms of gematria. You got to ask my brother-in-law John, who's an expert on gematria more than me. But he takes these numbers and matches them together, and that equals what he feels represents Hashem, which represents unity. Hashem is unity, and so forth. I'm going to move on with your permission or without your permission. Yud Aleph. In Parshas Baloscha, Rashi comments, when Aaron saw the tribal leaders dedicating the Mishkan, he became disheartened by the fact that he did not participate. He didn't have anything to bring to the Mishkan, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, Chayecha, by your life, your portion is greater than theirs, for you will kindle and set up lamps in order. And he doesn't really go through the rest of this, okay? So once again, he proves from this source. Another thing about unity depends on the Jewish people, and the Makatzer here, the editor left that out, Yud Beis. This concept also applies to us today. All of our troubles and hardships have made us physically and spiritually weary. We've reached a state of despair, and many people are saying that we will totally perish, God forbid. There's no hope of any change for the better. It seems to me that King David had our generation in mind when he composed chapter 85 of Tehillim. Tosfos Yeshanu explains that King David composed the book of Tehillim for a time when the Jews are in exile. I mentioned many times that I write this book that I have no access to this farm in order to quote the exact sources of my statement from Tosfos Yeshanim that David HaMelech wrote the book of Tehillim for a time when the Jews were in exile. But David prayed on Israel's behalf. And he's quoting this once again from memory from the Tosfos Yeshanim. Return us, O God, our salvation, and annul your anger with us. Will you be angry with us forever? This is all Tehillim 85. Will you let your wrath endure from generation to generation? Will you not revive us again, that your people may rejoice to you? Show us your kindness, O God, our Lord, and grant us your salvation. I will hear what God, your Lord, what God, the Lord, will speak, for he will speak peace to his people, and to his pious ones, and will not let them revert to folly. Surely salvation is near to those who fear him, and they must deliver on honorably and they may dwell honorably in their land. That is to say, bend the knee and listen to what Hashem will say about David's request that he, God, should annul his anger and show us his kindness and salvation from now on. Hashem responds, for he will speak peace to his people and his pious ones, but let them not revert to folly. We cannot expect any improvement until peace is restored, until all segments of Israel united, from the good Jews, means referring to the pious ones, the simple and wicked Jews referred to as the people. So you got the good Jews and you have the people. So both of them are mentioned in this Tehillim. For even the most sinful Jews, part of the Jewish nation. Thus the verse says, for he will speak peace to his people and to his pious ones. That's the pasuk in Tehillim. Peace must be restored to all parts of the nation, from those called people to those called pious ones. But let us not revert to folly. They must not revert to their old foolish ways of causing division and strife. They must not divide themselves into factions I mentioned above. For division is the cause of all our troubles and brings only curses and destruction upon Israel. However, when we unite and become a nation, no diversity of evil affliction will harm us. Once again, united. As the Medrash says, if there's peace among the people of Israel, then even if they worship idols, the Holy One, blessed be He who says, no adversity will harm them. As it says, Ephraim is attached to idols, let him be, says Hosea. But when they are divided, it says, the heart is divided, now they shall be found guilty. So division, when we're united, God considers us all God-fearing. Therefore, and here's the part he writes in bold, therefore I lift my voice to the people of our generation who've been through a dreadful and brutal fiery furnace, people who have suffered all of Eov's affliction, if not more, people for whom there is no vision or hope for a cure. He looks like he thinks he's at the end of this. He's not, of course. Please let us try just this once to fulfill the words of Chazal according to their simple meaning. They informed us numerous times that our only hope is to unite completely, avoid division, as they demonstrate from above from the Medrash and Talmud. If we do this, we will see the truth of their words. We will reach our desired goal, the true redemption with God's help. Therefore, we must unify the entire nation from one end to the other. Only the task of building and settling our land can be the middle bar, the Briach HaTichon. Lavriach means to unify. The Briach HaTichon was the middle bar in the building of the walls of the Mishkan. They'll bring us all together. This is the only mitzvah that's capable of doing so, as I explained in the previous chapter. We must do so because the angel of death that hovers above us in power and memorial, as discussed above. Then when we unite, Hashem will be pleased with us, and He will remember us according to the promises of redemption and compassion speedily in our times. This gathering unification will not harm the Orthodox Jews in any way. Don't be afraid, he says. Let me illustrate this with an example. A factory building is surrounded on the outside by a great wall. Even though the inside of a building contains many types of rooms, cubicles, and sections, each one serving its own purpose, the large surrounding wall makes them all into one unit called a factory. The same applies to uniting all of Israel for the holy task of rebuilding land. The task is only the surrounding wall. But inside, each God-fearing Jew can do as he pleases. He can educate his children in accordance with the written Torah and the old traditions of our sacred forefathers. We will only unite in the building and settling of the land. So he says, he's writing to his people afraid they will lose their traditions. As it says, the people assembled as one man in Jerusalem, and rather than we together will build land for God of Israel. Ibn Ezra explains that the words, rather we together will lose the entire congregation of Israel. Therefore, let it be clear that everyone must join together to build the land. The masses will thus bring honor to Hashem, as I said above, in the name of Shlomo Kluger. We must hope and pray that after many of our Jewish brethren gather in Eretz Yisrael, Hashem will direct their hearts to love Him and His Torah. And the Rambam, the Chatam Sofer, the Arachaim HaKadosh, Navid Yonatan, all write that this will occur before Mashiach arrives. Don't wait for Mashiach, it's got to be done before Mashiach. Therefore, we may and must not be overtly wise. We must do our share, and Hashem will do as He does, as Rashi writes in Sefer Bamidbar. Okay, Yedalad. Okay, the Medrash writes, the Medrash states, the Bible there's only 18 numbers, just so that you know. So we're up to 14. The Bible 18 is long. The Medrash states the entire world borrows from one another. In Divrei Chaim, the Rebbe of Psalms explains that this connects the people of the Israel of the world together like one man with one heart. Now man's limbs are interconnected. If they were not, he would perish. Man is built in such a way that some of his limbs need the others and some serve the others. Every intelligent person knows that the hands do not boast that they do everything for the other limbs, because the entire body is one. Also, the other limbs have no reason to feel and sad, discontented by the fact that they cannot do what the hands do. For the hands also have a deficiency; they lack intelligence. Therefore, none of the limbs feel inferior, superior to the others. For the body as a whole is one entity, consisting of some limbs that act and some that think. So, different things, different parts of the body do different things. In this way, man is perfected. However, if one of the limbs is missing, or if the head would act and the hands would think, the human race would cease to exist. He's quoting this from Tzan's Rebbe. This thus concludes the Rebbe of Tzan's true words of wisdom. The same applies to our national existence. Great idea. The same applies to our national existence. We need one another. We need people to serve as the hand, i.e., that is the laborers, and we need people to serve as the mind, the eyes of the congregation. Altogether, they form one nation. When there is division, the state ceases to function, and the people will never reach the path of life. Therefore, we need every Jew to help and build our holy land, and all of us must unite as one man with one heart. God wants all individual Jews to join together as one, as the midst of the four species demonstrates of bringing the lulav and the esrog and the four species. Chazal tells the four species represents four types of Jews that need to be bound together in one group. Unity connects us to the Creator and sweetens our judgments. Therefore, my brothers and friends, our only option is to unify all of Klal Yisrael, make it into a single unity through the positive commandment of Yishver. So it's the only thing that can tie us together. The prophet also states, "For there will be the seed of peace, the vine will give its fruit, and the land will give its produce, and the heavens will give their dew. I will bestow all these things upon the remnant of this people." The Medrash derives from here that the land's prosperity depends on peace. Now, why did the prophet say seed of peace and not sons of peace? Right, because it says, "For there will be the seed of peace, Zerah Shalom." It seems that he was alluding to the words Rabbeinu Chaim in the Sefer HaChaim. Who's this Rabbeinu Chaim? This Rabbeinu Chaim, who's the brother of the Maharal of Prague. Correct. We find that Hashem promised the people of Israel that He would never destroy them. Therefore, He always refers to them as seeds, as in the verse, "All of this land I will give to your seed." L'zaracha te'netzar sazos. I will give this seed of land to your seed, and they will inherit forever. Many other verses in Tanakh. The reason for this, they're called seed, is as follows: many onions and other vegetables, harden in the ground and become inedible. Nonetheless, the farmer leaves them in the ground to serve as seeds, for he hopes that these seeds will sprout edible fruits the next season. Similarly, God does not destroy an evil generation. Even though they are guilty, they're hard like seeds, He needs them to bear the seed of the sacred patriarchs. He hopes that completely righteous people will live at the time of the redemption, will sprout forth from this lowly generation. Thus, Hashem uses even an unbefitting generation to cease for the future, meritorious generations. This concurs with the Rashbam's statement that it's possible for 1,000 sinful generations to pass, after which a virtuous generation will sprout from them. So we got to work with the people, even if they're Rishayim. This is also true of the generation that will assemble in Eretz Yisrael. They themselves will be completely unworthy of the name of Israel, for it will be impossible to tell that they are Jews. Despite this, they will be important to God, and He will bring them to the land, for He will use them as seeds for the future generations to produce blessed offspring worthy of having God's Shekhinah among them, rest upon them. Therefore, the verse uses the word seed to demonstrate that we must make peace even those who merely serve as the function of a seed. So Hashem will bestow upon all these seeds the remnant of people of Israel. So even if you think of someone as hard like a seed and they're no value, nonetheless you got to work with these Rishayim as well. Okay. Now I'm going to slow down a little bit because this actually is, I'll say everything is important, but this actually is easy to read and makes sense. This he quotes now from Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, if he were alive today, he would be head of the Eda Charedis probably. He was the head of the old Yishuv, the Yishuv that lived in Israel for all those years. He was, I guess, the leading rabbi at that point, and probably a lot of the Charedim in Eretz Yisrael in the beginning of the 20th century. So he's coming from the right side of the Orthodox community. And he lives in there. He lives in Yerushalayim, of course. So recently Hashem brought to my attention a pamphlet entitled Eila Maaseh, which recounts the journeys of official Sofer Susman, the Av Basin of Budapest. I saw there a statement of the righteous Gaon, the Rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld Zecher Tzadik Levracha, in which he invokes merits upon today's corrupt pioneers Chalutzim. I don't know why he used the term corrupt. I guess maybe Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld used that term. And here's the quote from Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, and you have to remember it's coming from someone who we would identify as a Haredi, who surely would be the last person we would expect would be supportive of secular Zionism, except that he lives in Yerushalayim in the old Yishuv. These corrupt chalutzim display a great deal of self-sacrifice and patience for the sake of working the land. This demonstrates such a love of the land that we can anticipate that this love will bring them back to the proper path. Of course, he believes eventually they'll turn back, but right now he's got to support them. And therefore he saw this quote in the Sefer Eila Maaseh, which he's quoting from Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. In passing, I would like to quote from a letter written by Rav Sonnenfeld in this. I think it's the same sefer. It's found in Eila Maaseh. Rav Fishel Sofer asked him to express his opinion about buying fields in Eretz Yisrael. So official sofer, who's this guy who's traveling from Budapest, or he had to run, I guess, from Budapest, and he ended up meeting Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. He asked him, what about buying fields in Eretz Yisrael? And here's Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. Concerning your question, I say that the time has certainly come for the men of means to awaken themselves and pay attention to the holy settlement. Ever since the hearts of the holy Jewish nation began to yearn for a closeness to sanctity to Eretz Yisrael, they only supported those few remnants who strived to ascend to the Holy Land. Apparently, however, they did not arouse themselves to try to expand the holy settlement. There was always chalukah that they'd send money to support these people, these scholars in Eretz Yisrael. The brilliant and righteous Yavitz already discussed this holy matter adequately in his introduction to the Siddur, and he stirred and chastised the readers. In any event, even though Good Yisrael took action and the Gedolim of Poland became involved and made a great impact, they only did so after they decided to send messengers to the Holy Land and contemplate the matter. All those who volunteer for this endeavor must do the same. They must choose erudite men who know about worldly matters and contemplate the sacred endeavor. Afterwards, they can take counsel with the Gedolim in the land. But in other words, they should buy land. Apparently, the verse that that you not wake and rouse with love until desires has been fulfilled through us. In other words, the psukim in Shir Hashirim that says, "Don't wait until the love arouses," which people to interpret it to mean, "Don't do anything in Eretz Yisrael till God brings us back Mashiach." That's happened, and apparently, this desire means a divine awakening. May Hashem in His mercy bring salvation to His nation speedily in our days. Afterwards, when Rav official Sofer traveled to the Holy Land and met Rav Sonnenfeld, he said to him, so I guess he wrote the letter before they met. So he says, so the Rebbe agrees? In other words, what do you mean agree? Says Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld. He says, I look forward to this, that is, to labor for the settlement of the land. I beg you to come and buy fields in our holy land and keep the Shemitah, and of course, like others do. He was referring to the Rebbe of Ger's Bnei Brak and Petach Tikva, when the Rebbe of Ger actually sent followers to go develop Eretz Yisrael and make sure Eretz Yisrael would grow. Let's do one more piece. Let's do Ted Zayin. We'll leave Yud Zayin and Yud Chet for the next time, okay? I saw an Elamasi because it still deals with Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld. I saw an Elamasi, an idea that Rav Sonnenfeld used to say. It says, "You shall see the goodness of Yerushalayim, Urei B'tuv Yerushalayim." One must see only the good of Eretz Yisrael, that is, the positive sides of Yerushalayim. One must be careful not to be a spy, God forbid. The spies were punished because they slandered Eretz Yisrael at a time when there were no Jews there. How much more so now when there were many Jews in the land. Praise to my beloved friend Rav Lezer Sussman Shlita, son of Rav Ephraim Official Sofer, the rabbi of Beis Nabutas. He copied from parts of a manuscript of his father's eulogy for Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld. So now we're going to read about Rav Ephraim Fisher Sofer's, about Reb Official Sofer Sussman's eulogy for Rav Chaim Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld. Who will have pity on you, O Jerusalem, and who will bemoan you, beloved land? He never cursed anyone, it's Rav Sonnenfeld, under any circumstance. He was distressed more than anyone else about those who came and defiled the land by desecrating the holy Shabbos, eating forbidden foods, and eating chametz on Pesach. He invoked merit upon those lost souls, saying, the land of a day cultivate with such great devotion will bring them back to the proper path and purify their hearts. So he never wrote them out of the book. He would rebuke anyone who even slightly slandered the residents of the holy city, including those who were non-religious. He once told me the Shulchan Aruch states that the righteous people fast on the 17th of Elul because the spies who spread the evil report about the land died on that day. The Magen of Avram asked, does it not say when the wicked perish there's jubilation? Why are we fasting when the spies died on the 17th of Elul? That was the plague that when they brought back the evil report. So the Shlai answered, the spies were righteous men. Thus even tzaddikim can become spies. Even a tzaddik can be a spy against Eretz Yisrael. So anyone who slanders the people working in Eretz Yisrael are like the spies who slandered of Israel. So therefore, even though they were tzaddikim, they became spies. So even if you're a tzaddik, if you take to task people living in Israel who are working in the land, in Mechal Shabbos, you've missed the point. The Torah says that Hashem constantly seeks at Eretz Yisrael. Also, the sanctity of the land is connected with the sanctity of our Creator. May His name be blessed. Hence, just as Hashem is the essence of unity, so the Holy Land is bound with the essence of unity. Therefore, the land does not tolerate the people of Israel unless they too are bound with this essence of unity. The verse alludes to this when it says, Mikyam Yisrael, one nation, Goy Echad Baretz. Who is like you, a nation of Israel, one nation on the land? That is to say, the land carries and tolerates the Jews only when they are united and undivided. Thus we must do, as I said, and join all of Israel together, rebuilding the whole land, that we will become truly united. So we'll take a break at this point. He's got two more letters, Yud Zayin and Yud Chet. Yud Chet is actually very long, and then he comes to the end of it and closes out. We will do that in Yud Hashem on Wednesday, and we will have finished the Sefer of Em HaBanim Chap3, and I'll be excited. Okay, great. So today we have Yud Zayin and Yud Chet to be able to read, to go through, and you'll see It's actually fascinating because when he reaches the end and he says there are 18 chapters, he says that's a good sign. However, you'll see in a moment that 17 is like reasonable length, but 18 just seems to go on for a whole bunch of papers. So it looks like a whole bunch of pages. Looks like he tried to keep it at 18. So you could say, well, we have Chai at the end, and then I'll wrap it up. But anyway, this is the last lick, so to speak, of this.
36?
The 246.
246.
It's Yud Zayin, Ot Yud Zayin. Okay. One more page, I think. Odechad. Yeah. Okay, so I stated above, he says, the Baal Tanya learned a lesson relevant to the Jewish nation from the war that broke out in his days. And I also quoted the Tanakh Ve'Eliyahu that indicates we should learn how to serve God from the nations. Therefore, we should also learn a lesson from today's war. This actually is interesting because he quotes contemporary politicians, contemporary non-Jewish politicians. It's the first time he does this in the Sefer. We haven't read him yet. He's going to quote contemporary politicians, not of our day, of his day, of 1943. We see he's not quoting Donald Trump. Okay, he's not quoting Obama. We see today that countries that were on two opposite extremes of the political spectrum joined together to reach lofty goals that they set for themselves. They united and put aside all the divisive issues in order to combine and increase their strength. They realized that this is the only way to achieve their goal. We must do the same. We, the Jews, have to do the same and combine all our strengths for our sacred goal. Similarly, I saw in the daily newspaper that a distinguished priest from the country said at a gathering in his honor, I don't know who this is, and the footnote doesn't tell me either, may God help us stop looking for things that cause division and disunity and look only for things that engender solidarity and harmony. Even though during the peaceful times we allow ourselves to divide into factions, I guess within Christianity with different divisions, in Protestant, Catholic, within Protestantism, during the difficult times like this, it is forbidden to separate from one another. We must ensure that we remain as one man with one heart. Now, if he said this about the Gentiles, what are we to say in our own terrible and rightful situation? How can it be morally correct for us to remain separate? Okay? Valid point. He's quoting a priest. I also saw in the newspapers that the Prime Minister of Hungary, Count Talaki, said at a certain gathering, I quote, I'm only the captain of the ship. My objective is to steer the ship successfully to its destination. But I can only accomplish this if the ship is intact. If it breaks into pieces, however, I will be unable to steer it successfully, for it will sink to the depths before it can reach its destination. I also saw, so he's trying to say like he's the guy, he's the Ma'ached, I guess, he's the one who puts everybody together.
He's the captain of the ship.
He's the captain of the ship, but if the ship got different people on different ends of the ship rowing in different ways, different motors pulling in different ways, the ship will come apart.
Yeah, it went down with the ship.
Well, I don't know. I also saw that Sweden's Prime Minister said that man must take current situations into account and plan accordingly. During troublesome times like these, someone who behaves the same way he does during normal times, when everything else runs smoothly, is insane. And as we talked about, I think we mentioned here, when Israel has a military crisis, they formed a unity government, and they've done until now. Chazal tell us that if a Gentile sage says something wise, he's called a wise man. They also say if someone tells us that there is wisdom among the non-Jews, believe them. There is chachma. Therefore, I cited these statements to teach us how to act during difficult times, or during these difficult times. In reality, though, we do not need to learn this from them, for our holy master, the Noam Elimelech, already states this, and he writes as follows, from the Noam Elimelech's prayer, which he said before davening, we should see the good qualities in our friends, not their shortcomings, and we should speak justly to one another. Whenever Israel was in distress, the leaders of the generation tried more than anything else to make peace among the people and unite them into one perfect unit. We find that when the Philistines attacked Israel, Shmuel said, gather all the people to Mitzpah, and I will pray to the Lord your God. And they gathered at Mitzpah and drew water. And the Yerushalmi comments, Rav Shimon Bar Yitzchak said, Shmuel wore the cloak of all Israel. This is puzzling. What does that mean, the cloak of all of Israel? It means that he enwrapped all of Israel in one cloak and united them. He was the uniter. Through this initial act, Samuel caused Israel to be saved from the Philistines by coming together. This also explains Shmuel's statement, gather all of Israel, and they gathered and joined together. And later on it says that Shmuel took one rock and called it Even HaEzer, the rock of help, the rock of assistance. This demonstrates that becoming like one rock was the only thing that helped them defeat the Philistines. So whenever there's a danger, coming together has to work for us. So So he's saying what we know. The verse about Yaakov Avinu that he took from the stones of the place, and he also alludes to this. Chazal comment that he took all the 12 stones and they became like one. At that moment, Yaakov foresaw the destruction and tore us to behave like one rock. Immediately when they became one, behold, the Lord, the Kadosh Baruch Hu was over Yaakov in the dream, and he promised Yaakov he would protect them. So he's referring to a medrash that there were 12 stones that he took around him, and the stones began to argue. Each one says, I want to be under the head of the tzaddik. Right, the 12 stones of the 12 tribes. And they went back and forth in this sense, and they began pushing each other. Because this stone said, I want to be under the head of the tzaddik, I don't want to be this foot. And the end was that Kadosh Baruch Hu made them all one stone, or they all came together, and they became one united. And this is based upon the pasuk that when he woke up, it says, Vaikach eto even ashesam rashotov. He took the stone that was under his head. Before he went to sleep, it says, Vaikach me'avnei hamakom. He took avanim. When he went to sleep, when he woke up, he took the even. There was one even. So once again, unity was what made the dream of God come true, and unity was what saved the Jewish people and saved him. Okay. Now, Amar HaMachaber, this is an interesting term, says the author. This means he's coming now to the end of this. Says the author, God willing, I intend to complete this work, and in particular his 4th chapter dealing with unity and peace, with this section, Chai, which equals life, right? This is section number 18. Our sages have already told us that omens have significance. So if I'm going to conclude this on Chai, it's a good sign for life. Okay, and the Ivus writes, for example, this is about the numbering of the simanim of the different chapters in the Shulchan Aruch. So a wondrous thing happened, writes the Ivus, in the numbering of the sections of the Torah Arachayim. By chance, the law of shofar found out in the section, which is section 586, whose numerical value, the gematria, equals that of the word shofar. For though the author did not intend for this to happen, the truth felt in its place. So this demonstrates that Hashem approved of the work because the author wrote it for the sake of heaven, and anyone who works for the sake of heaven is shown an unexpected good sign. So the same way that the siman, that the chapter deals with shofar, is in the chapter that equals the gematria of shofar, if I'm finishing my work and running out of steam and I'm concluding now with number 18, that's a good sign that about unity should come together. Similarly, the Rashbas writes, all perceptive people realize that Hashem helps those who do sacred tasks whenever necessary. It's the same is true of this book. God is my witness that I did not intend to conclude my book with the letters Chai. But when I numbered the sections, I found the last one spelled the word Chai, and I was overjoyed, for I saw this as a heavenly approval for everything written in this book. So it looks like these paragraphs were written after he concluded.
How we find this chapter is Chai.
How do you find chapters Chai?
No, yes, because he was going to finish 17.
Well,
no, when you write more than one chapter at the same time. You put your ideas down
for all the parts, except for the first chapter. First chapter does not have letters as simanim, but beginning with the second chapter, it is broken up into different letters. Different topics have different letters. So he went back, and after he finished writing chapter 4, after chapter 3, he numbered it all. After chapter 2, he numbered it all. After finishing chapter 4, he numbers in, guess what? Bingo, it's number Chai.
Oh, okay.
That's what you'd have to say. I know you, with the cynic in us, says he kind of renumbered the numbers to make it work. But it looks like he's being honest about it. The prophet says, I create expression of the lips. Peace, peace for the far. Shalom, shalom, al-rachuk v'al-kava, Amar Hashem, v'urfativ, and I will heal him. Pasuk in Isaiah 57. The verse is difficult to understand for two reasons. First, it should have said, for near and far, not far and near. Because the person first needs to be at peace with those who are near to him, and only afterwards those who are far. Second, what is the connection between the phrase, says the Lord, and I will heal him, the Urfasim, I think it is, and the pasuk Shalom Shalom. In order to answer these questions, allow me to preface with something I heard from my brother-in-law of Shlomo Shlita. He related that his grandfather, Rabbi Menachem Katz, who was summoned the burial society, the Chever Kedisha, prior to his death. The entire community gathered around them and he blessed them, and he also cautioned them about the importance of peace, explaining Chazal's statement, greatest peace, Gadol HaShalom, because the Shem of Hashem is erased for peace. Because when you have the water to make peace between the husband and wife, you take the name of Hashem for the sota and you put it in the water, and the name is erased in order to bring a husband and wife together, to clarify whatever may have happened or not happened. He says there are two types of peace. A, negative peace, in which people do not join together. Everyone turns to his own affairs and has nothing to do with one another. There's no strife between them, but it's not a true peace. It's like a sulcha. It's like a ceasefire. true peace in which people join together and live as one with love and affection. Now, in the case of a sota, the husband and wife became separated and distanced from each other because he suspects her of being unfaithful. When God's name is erased, they reunite and make peace with one another. Thus, Chazal say, greatest peace, Gadol Shalom. Which peace is so invaluable and primary? The one in which the name of God, Holy One, blessed be He, is erased. That is to say, a peace that unites those who are far apart and enables them to live a life of peace and brotherly love. This kind of peace is great and exceedingly lovely. This is the end. This is the story about his grandfather that is being told by whose the brother-in-law is referring to his grandfather. Okay, these were his last words. With them, he passed on to the next world. Behold, the Chovat Levavot states that peace was created in man to unite those who are divided, for speech unites people. Furthermore, I already explained above that Hashem loves Israel primarily when all segments of the nation are at peace, even if they worship idols, God forbid. When they unite, Hashem will grant them a purifying spirit and direct their hearts to return to the proper path. This explains the verse mentioned above. I create expression of the lips. The main purpose of creating speech was to engender peace. Therefore it says, Shalom Shalom La Rachel, peace, peace for the far. The repetition of the word peace demonstrates its primacy. Shalom Shalom. The verse specifically mentions the far first to demonstrate that we must make peace between people who are far from each other. So first I got to make shalom shalom with those who are rachok. That's the greatest peace as I mentioned above. Afterwards it says v'la rachok v'la karov, and to the near, meaning we must also strive the peace between those who are close to us from the beginning but not close enough. So therefore you obviously see where he's going to make peace with the chalutzim who are far from him religiously. Do not fear making peace between extremes will harm you. For it says, Lord, and I will hear Rufativ. You must do your duty. Hashem will do his. He'll cure everyone, both spiritually and physically. With God's help, this is a true Torah interpretation. Thus, my brother, every Jew must speak peace to his nation and avoid dividing the united ones. Our entire salvation depends on this. Therefore, I'm extremely sad that there are still people among us who publicly condemn and antagonize the builders and settlers of the land. They read, let Jerusalem know of her abominations, and examine the abominations of our holy mother, Eretz Yisrael. They provoke hatred and enmity against her builders by calling them heretics, sinners, and infidels, and by saying that it's forbidden to associate with them. In this way, they bring disunity to the united and prevent the entire nation from unifying through this exceedingly lofty mitzvah. I call out to you incessantly, O people of Israel, young and old alike. Do not pay attention to these comments, even if they come from a distinguished and important person, like some of the Hungarian Rabbanim. He is wrong, and God is displeased by such statements. For as I mentioned above, the actions of these builders, whom the complainers call sinners and rebels, will give rise to exceedingly lofty events, including the elevation of Israel's pride, the elevation of the pride of Mashiach, and the building of the house of David. He's done this all before. He's just summarizing. I also cite the Maharal of Prague, the Mikdash Shmuel, the Shach, the Noam Elimelech, as saying that great and holy things must develop from mundane matters and through sinners. These sacred rabbis are more reliable than all of the distinguished men. So it's better to rely upon the Maharal of Prague, the Mikdash Shmuel, the Shach, the Noam Elimelech, than a rabbi who lived in the 40s. These sacred rabbis are more reliable than all of today's distinguished men. How can these men compare to those lions, those arayot? On the contrary, every God-fearing Jew must join the builders in their sacred task. In this way, the religious Jews will enhance the sanctity of the land after the secular Jews succeeded in initiating the building. Furthermore, the merit of Israel's complete unity will cause Hashem to raise the Shekhinah among us. He will then bestow a purifying spirit upon the secular Jews and cause them to return and serve Him wholeheartedly. Thus the prophet says, I will remove the iniquity of the Lord in that day, one day. And Hashem says, peace, peace from far and near, etc., etc. That is to say, you will see that you will live peacefully, even with those who you call sinners. Building the land will unite you, for this mitzvah alone is capable of bringing unity. As I explained above at length, do not worry about the secular Jews, for I, God, will heal them with the heavenly spirit of purity. They will eventually become Baalei Tshuva. Those who sanctify themselves and publicly advocate division speak out of ignorance, as the holy Rabbi Shula of Kutner writes. Okay? Do not be surprised that righteous and distinguished men speak ignorantly, for I'll show you an even greater example of this, where people who were smart spoke foolishly or ignorantly. I already stated that the angel of the Magid Meisharim told the Beit Yosef, told Rabbi Yosef Cairo, that Moshe chose the wisest and most righteous men to be the spies. Nevertheless, the Medrash refers to them as foolish messengers, since they spread an evil report about the land. These were wise people. These were Talmidei Chachamim. They were leaders. Yes, how could they do this? But they did. The same is true today. Our tzaddikim are certainly no more righteous or learned than the meraglim, the spies were. Even Rabbi Zera, who was very careful about his speech, called the Babylonians foolish. Sometimes the rabbis in the antiquity also they spoke Lashon Hara. They did so even though they were Gedolei Torah, because they did not ascend to Eretz Yisrael, because the Babylonians did not ascend to Eretz Yisrael at the time of Ezra. Furthermore, now that we have remained few in numbers due to our numerous sins and we are the survivors of the sword, logic dictates that we embrace each other and extend the hand to one another. Therefore, my friends and brothers, do not pay any attention to those who slander the land, even if they are righteous, truly righteous. For I mentioned above the rabbi of Eretz Yisrael, the rabbi of Yerushalayim, the rabbi of the Ein HaCharedis, the rabbi of the old Yeshiva of Yosef Chaim Sarafal Zecher Tzaddik Levacha, derived from the words of the Shlah that even tzaddikim can be spies. We saw that last time. Realize that all those who oppose Aliyah on the building and the resettlement of the land belong to the camp of spies. That all those who choose Aliyah belong to Yeshua and Kalev's camp. Okay. So in other words, forget what they say, follow what's true. Use your own brain. Follow the other people who said to support these people. The Arizal revealed to his disciple of Chaim Vital that when one chooses a mitzvah for which a certain tzaddik sanctified himself, the soul of that tzaddik comes to his aid. That's fascinating. The author of the Mikdash Shmuel once entered a study hall. He studied a base medrash, and the soul of the Ruach Kadosh stood before him, as is well known. It's obviously some ice he knew about. This is true, same is true today. Yoshua and Kalev sacrificed themselves for Aliyah. The entire Jewish nation wanted to stow them, but they said, let us go up, alone not let. Similarly, if we sacrifice ourselves for Aliyah, the souls of Yoshua and Kalev will come to our aid. Thus, we must decide, as Yaakov Avinu did during his time of trouble, that when Hashem relieves us from our enemies, we will sacrifice ourselves to elevate the pride of our land. Then the merit of Eretz Yisrael will save us from misfortune and deliver us from distress. But we will only achieve this when Jews unite, because they have all the descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and they all need it. Okay, etc., etc. My beloved colleague, Rabbi Saul David Margal Ishlita, the rabbi of Linat HaTzedek Synagogue here in Budapest, showed me the following statement in Talmud. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, conquering Eretz Yisrael precedes the destruction of idolatry. Wow. After conquering the land, they will search for idols in order to uproot and destroy them. In my opinion, this is why Ezra did not separate the people of his generation from their abominable ways immediately upon entering the land. First, they had to get to Eretz Yisrael. He did so only 20 years after he built the temple in Jerusalem, because he did not want to cause strife and condemnation while he conquered and built the land. True story. He fulfilled Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's rule that conquering the Eretz Yisrael precedes the destruction of idolatry. The same applies to us. We need all the strength of our holy nation for the sacred task of building the land. We must proceed arm in arm, and then Hashem will accept the work of our hands and bring it to a successful end. The complete redemption will develop from this speedily in our days. We must convey these and similar ideas to the children of Israel to fulfill our obligation deriving from the verse. The Lord said to Moshe, speak to the children of Israel, Daber b'nei Israel. They will travel. This refers to the Torah scholars of each generation must generate Avad Yisrael, unity and peace, in order to tip the scales in Israel's favor and bring them merit, life, and peace. Now, someone should ask, who are you? Who appointed you, the man, to lift his voice and speak to the children of Israel? Who are you, Rav Teichel? What gives you the chutzpah? I will give two answers. First of all, every Torah scholar has the right to lift his voice. Everyone can do it. The great halachic authority, our master, the Mabid, writes this explicitly in his introduction to a Sefer Beit Elokim. The Medrash writes, comments on 252, the Medrash comments on the verse, this is the book of the descendants of Adam. This teaches that the Holy One, blessed be He, showed Adam the preachers of every generation, Dar, the wise men of every generation, the leaders of every generation. The fact that the Medrash says each generation, Dar, and not a generation, alludes to the fact that Hashem will not forsake His nation. In every generation, without exception, there will be preachers, wise men, and leaders, or at least one or two of them. Not a single generation will be left without shepherds. Therefore, a man who is completely engrossed in Torah must act as if he is from the book of the descendants of Adam. One of the preachers, wise men, or leaders of the generation. It's not arrogant, because by doing so, he adorns himself to become worthy and bring merit to others. So one reason is that, you know what, I'm a Talmud Chacham, I can do it. Let me just get a little drink. Okay, give me 10, 20 seconds.
Are you here to speak, Moshe?
Can I speak?
Yeah, you're losing your voice.
Yeah.
I could read.
Good. Read.
Want me to?
Please. Thank you.
Okay. I was a little ahead, so...
Second,
the Rambam?
Thanks. Yeah.
Second, the Rambam writes that the fixing of a leap year is treated like a case of capital punishment, therefore requiring a majority of 2, because it alters the year's regular course.
Right.
We see from this that altering something's regular course makes it similar to a case of life and death. Now let us apply this to our discussion. Since we want to detach the Jewish people from the customs they learned in exile, our situation is like a case of life and death. Moreover, since exile actually involves life and death issues, as we see today, our situation is certainly similar to a case of capital punishment.
So even that's significant in a capital punishment case, you have to make a decision. You have to start to reach that decision with a beit din.
Now the halacha states that the least significant judge speaks first in cases of capital punishment.
Right.
Thus, since I am the least significant of this generation, how humble I am, it is certainly fitting for me to speak first and express my humble opinion on the rectification and restoration of our people. The great ones, Gedolim, of the generation will hear me and accept the truth from whence it came. They will fulfill Chazal's statement. Fortunate is the generation in which the great ones listen to the small ones. In truth, I did not invent even one idea in this book. I drew everything from the wellspring of living waters, the well dug by the princes of the Torah, our rabbis of the Talmud, Midrash, Zohar, and other holy books. I built this book, which I present before you upon the foundations of their words.
Okay, so in other words, now it sounds like he's being humble. Is this false humility?
Yeah.
But before he said, just called himself shepherd.
Right, so the answer is that, he is a great scholar, he's a great Talmud Chacham. We've seen how much he quotes by heart, but he's not a rebbe of a flock. He's an individualist. His flock has already been shipped off from Pishtian at the beginning of the war. He lost his people. He's working on his own. He's running around as a refugee. He's not like the Satmar Rebbe or the other Rebbes who had thousands of Jews at their beck and call who really could speak for them, could speak and influence them. So he's viewing himself as like a little guy. So he may be really a great scholar, but in terms of leadership, he's a small man. He says, so now start with me. That's why I can speak. It's an important situation. You got to start with the smallest judge.
What happened for his congregation?
He was in Pishtian, which was in not Slovakia, was it? It was in Poland or somewhere. And the Nazis came in and shipped them off early in the war.
And he
ran away first to Nitra, and then from Nitra eventually came to Budapest, and he stays in Hungary. He stays in Hungary until 1944, and then as the Nazis begin moving into Hungary and clearing people out, he runs back to where he came from, and that's where he gets caught. And he's sent on a train. They're sending him to a death camp, and that's when he has the whole machlokas about a piece of bread. But he actually is not originally from Hungary. He comes to Hungary, so he's out of his milieu. He doesn't have Hasidim with him. Okay.
The Hasidim left him. But the Satmar Rebbe left the Hasidim.
Yes, so actually what he does is he hides when they shift the people off. He goes to the Beis Medrash and hides in the attic. Many people hid. He was lucky enough they didn't catch him.
But Satmar Rebbe went on the Kastner train.
Yes, he did. Satmar Rebbe and a lot of other Rebbes tried to escape and did escape to Eretz Yisrael. That's correct. They left their people behind.
First to Switzerland.
Whatever. Okay, let's go on. I want to get to the end of
The
this.
Vilna Gaon teaches us a very important principle of life in his work, Shanat Eliyahu. Torah Kohanim explains the verse, you shall leave the gifts to the poor as follows. Place the gift before the poor and let them grab it, even if one strong man says, put it up for grabs. We listen to the strong one, even if 99 weak men say, divide it. Because his claims coincide with the halacha.
Right.
This is so even though he is biased, for he can grab more than the weak ones. The rule is, we listen to someone whose opinion coincides with the halacha, even if he is biased about that particular thing. This is evident from the Torah Kohanim.
Right, you got to make a decision halachically. You can't make everybody happy. Therefore,
realize that everything I wrote and cited in this book is in accordance with the halacha. This is the Torah's outlook and the will of God. Therefore, you must listen to me. Everything I wrote is true and clear halacha, like Moshe's Torah from the Almighty. May Hashem sway the hearts of all the children of Israel to accept the truth from whence it came. And may His blessed name be praised in the heavens above and on the earth below. Amen. So may it be God's will. I know that not everyone will be pleased with my words and that some will shout thunderously at me. But before anyone raises his voice, let me remind him of the story in the Yerushalmi. Resh Lakish said, a prince who sins receives lashes. Rabbi Yehuda the prince heard this and became angry. So Resh Lakish fled. Afterwards, Rabbi Yehuda himself looked for him and said, why did you disgrace me with that statement? Resh Lakish retorted, do you think that I will refrain from relating the teachings of God because I fear you?
right, because he was called Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, and Resh Lakish said, a Nasi that sins, a prince that sins, gets Malchus. So Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi took it as a reference to him being the Nasi. And Resh Lakish didn't say I didn't mean you. He says that's just the way a statement is. I got to state it as it is. So yeah, maybe it even applies to you. You don't shout me down because you're simply the leader of the Jewish people. I say the same thing. Go ahead.
I say the same thing. Do you think that I will refrain from relating the teachings of God because of the animosity of those people whose honor will be damaged by the ideas written in this book, which are all based on Chazal? Whatever I wrote or cited in this work is the truth of the Torah, and anyone who subscribes to truth will admit to the truth. I am prepared to debate anyone who wishes to do so, but only a halachic debate, as Tosafot wrote. As I cited in the second introduction in the name of the Maharaval and the Mabit.
Good.
My heart is filled with more thoughts on this issue, but since this work has already grown quite large, I will stop here. God willing, I will return to you, people of this generation, in writing and speech, and through the healing tongue of the sages. May Hashem bind the breach of his people and heal the wound of their blow speedily in our days. Amen. Amen. So may it be God's will. Blessed is the merciful one who assists us.
Okay.
I completed my book on Thursday night, the eve of the Holy Sabbath, on which we read, your seed will inherit the gate of its enemies.
Which is this? V'yivash Sarech et Shar Sonav.
Israel, in whom I will be glorified.
Yeah, Bachat Ba'er.
Here in the capital of Budapest, or as they say, Budapest. I am in the midst of the exile. May Hashem transform exile into Israel's redemption by adding an aleph, which represents Hashem's unity. Let us be glad and rejoice in the salvation of the Lord, to whom we hope. May Hashem's glorious name be blessed forever and ever. Amen. So may it be God's will. Amen. Amen. Amen.
So he finishes writing this in 1943 on V'yivash Sarech et Shar Sonav. When is that part? That's Parshas Vayera. Parshas Vayera. He finishes Vayera, which is about a month after Simchas Torah, and now he talks about when he started printing this.
What was the Aleph?
The Aleph is going from Golus to Geula. Gola to Gula. Galut to Gulat Yisrael. Galut Yisrael to Gulat Yisrael. It says add a little bit of Aleph, which represents Hashem. There's one Aleph is unity. By adding the unity of God, you transfer Galut, diaspora, the exile, into Gulat, to redemption. It's just a little vart at the very end. So he finishes this anyway. Timing-wise, he finishes this in Vayera 5704, 1943. So that's, let's say, somewhere around November. And when does he stop printing it? It tells us here. Go ahead, the addendum.
Want me to read it?
Yeah.
The printing of this book began on Parshat Va'era, 5703, and was completed successfully on Thursday of Parshat Miketz, the second day of Chanukah, 5704.
So he starts on Va'era, so he finished it on Va'era, begins printing it when he finishes it, and it takes him all the way until the second day of Chanukah. So it's going now from about, I guess, Parshas Va'era, somewhere around the middle of Cheshvan, maybe towards the end of Cheshvan. Bereshis is usually about the 23rd, 25th of Tishrei. 4 weeks later is going to be the middle to the end of Cheshvan, and he finishes this on the end, the second day of Kislev, which is the end of Kislev. So it takes him, looks like a month to print.
December.
It takes him a month to print. It's not that bad. A month of printing.
It's very fast.
Okay, and I guess I'm not sure where he writes this addendum. Maybe in the second, maybe there was time to put this addendum into the actual sefer when they came to the final galleys. Okay, may Hashem recall the miracles.
May Hashem recall the miracles that He performed for our forefathers in those days and renew them for us today. May the following verses be fulfilled through us. He puts an end to the darkness, and the Jews had light and gladness and joy. Esther. So may it be for us speedily in our days. Amen. This week's Torah portion states, He, Yosef's servant, said to the brothers, Peace be to you. Do not fear. The godly author of Megillah Amukot writes, he was hinting to them, when you live together peacefully, you need not worry. If he, Israel, is attached to idols, let him be, because peace is Esau's adversary, as he is called the hater of peace. This is the meaning of the verse above. Peace be to you, therefore do not fear, because Esau's adversary is present. It is well known that all of his words were said with Ruach HaKodesh.
He's hoping for peace. This is like the bracha for peace at the end of his book. All right. Final words. Here we go. I thank
Hashem with all my heart that He granted me the privilege to complete this work successfully. So may He grant me the privilege to publish all my works, to glorify His blessed name. May our eyes behold Jerusalem rebuilt like the high heavens. May His eternal kingdom be exalted. Amen. Amen.
Okay, now here's the coda to the coda.
At this time, at the completion of the printing, I will make it known that the incident mentioned at the end of the second introduction happened to me. Blessed is Hashem who performed this wonderful kindness for me. May he never abandon or forsake me. May I behold Israel's solace and salvation speedily in our days.
Do you know what he's referring to? He's referring to the name Em HaBanim Chap3. So he wrote in the end of the second introduction, he said, why am I calling this Em HaBanim Chap3? Once upon a time there was a rabbi, and the rabbi had a daughter or two daughters, and they ran away, and they were captured, and they were kept for Pesach, and the wife was at home and didn't know what happened to them. He actually was trying to smuggle his daughters over the border. They were caught, and finally, through a lot of intervention and a lot of bribes, they were finally released. And when they finally came home, how much was the wife happy about the release of her child and her husband? Em HaBanim Chap3, the mother of her children rejoices. And of course, he says this is the analogy to the Jewish people who have been exiled, have been imprisoned, and we hope to get out and go back to our land of Eretz Yisrael. When he wrote it in the end of chapter 2, he wrote it about a rabbi, right? A certain person who's unidentified. Now he says at the very end, I got to tell you, this whole Maisla that I told you was really me. So
his family was with him in Budapest?
No, they was before Budapest, before they went to Budapest.
Right. So then
this was the beginning of the war. Before he was even in hiding, they knew things were trouble, and the Nazis were coming down and taking single girls. Right. So he tried to smuggle his girls over the border, probably into Czechoslovakia, I don't know where.
Right.
And they had someone who they bribed, who took them and showed them. Something happened. The end was they got to the border and they were caught.
Right.
They were thrown in jail. And who knows what happened when they get thrown in jail. They couldn't communicate back home with what happened. Right. So the wife was home by herself. He was with his daughters. They ended up staying in Pesach in this jail. And somehow they found where they were, and people were able to bribe their way out, and they finally got back.
And then what happened to the family?
Eventually, many things happened afterwards, and eventually they came to Budapest. Eventually,
it was the family.
Yeah, but
when he writes this, his family was.
His family is with him. His family is with him. He keeps his family together. It's fascinating.
Okay. And then they are taken. All of them. They are taken into the camp.
And then they're all taken to the camp. But then he runs. And eventually, when the Nazis began closing in on Hungary, he heard it was safer to go back to where he was from. And he tried to go back. I don't know if he got back there, but he got captured. And that's when they put him on the train to one of the camps. And it was the end of the war, so the same train had Jews as Ukrainian prisoners.
So he was killed. How about his family?
His family survived. That's why we know. We have writings from his daughter who wrote about it, and his sons wrote about it. There should be somewhere in the beginning of this a letter from one of his sons. I'll show you the picture in a moment. But there's a letter from his son giving haskama to the fact that this was now coming here. Forward by the author's son, Rabbi Menachem Teichtel. It was printed again after the war. I think I once mentioned to you there was a machlokes between the two sons about the copyright things. So I actually have a copy of an old. I have the new copy. I have a new copy really by the photostat, but I have the copy that was published somewhere in the 50s without a copyright date on it. Because it was the original that was printed in 1943 that they found the copy and they simply just offset it. They used the photo offsetting, which is basically like our Xeroxing. Photo offsetting was an invention back in the early 1900s. They took pictures of the plates and what it was, and they were able to kind of print off that, make a plate from that. So they built it from that, but that was the machlokas at that time between the sons. This is just a translation of that. You want to see his picture. Okay, so B'sikum, in short, he kind of hopes that after the end of this, they will lead and everybody go to Eretz Yisrael, and they make a country. To some extent, his prophecy came true, or his hope came true. They did. And we are today because of where he was. He looks like a Hasidic Yid. Right? I'm not quite sure. It's not clear, by the way, if during the war he looked like this. When he was hiding in Budapest, he probably had his beard shaved off and his hat off. He looked like a farmer or something. Yeah, all of them looked like that. None of them looked like Hasidic Rebbes and Hasidic Hasidim. Otherwise, they would have been yanked. Okay, so maybe we'll stop here. Next time I want to introduce, I told you what we're going to do now. Do something very different. We're going to go very slow. It's not a long piece, but it's a very complex piece. I'm going to do something by the introduction to the Rav Kook's Parish on Tefillah. I've never done anything like this. It's going to be a learning experience for me. You guys will have to let me know on Tefillah. It's a very different kind of language. It's a language that's very flowery. very complex, very complicated.
Who's that?
Rav Kook. Rav Kook wrote a sefer Olat Riyah. He wrote a perush on Tefillah, but in the introduction was now translated. So we can read it. Because the Hebrew is complex and the English is complex.
That's the old Rav
Kook, Rav Yoshua Kook. So the old Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of Israel, he was the chief rabbi of Israel before it was Israel. He wrote many things, but his language is extremely complicated language, esoteric language, high language, spiritual language. I hope you're a spiritual kind of person, because it's really that kind of language. But I have it has just been translated. The introduction to this is translated. It's going to be extremely difficult. You'll have to give me feedback. I hope you'll like it. I hope I'll like it. I hope I can prepare for it, because it's extremely complex. We'll have to do it. We'll do it in the Hebrew, the English, and then I also have the footnotes. I just really have to print out. We'll go through the footnotes on this English edition, which really will help us understand the English, so you'll understand the Hebrew.
How did you choose this one?
Why did I choose it? I chose it because I never learned Rav Kook.
Oh, okay.
For me, it's a challenge. And I wanted to do, you know what, I'll tell you why. Because this is, I'll give you the logic. This is really about Jewish thought. Right? We're doing a piece on Talmud, we're doing a piece on Parshas Shavua, we're doing a piece on Jewish law. The fourth piece that I want to do is something that's about Jewish thought. Jewish ideology, Jewish values. This is not halacha, this is really about thinking about Jewish Weltanschauung, the ideologies. So I wanted to choose fill that slot with something like that. Rav Kook has a lot of thought books. The book that he wrote on Tefillah is really not just a parish on Tefillah, word by word. It's not going to tell you what Adon Olam means. It's going to tell you what the soul is thinking at Adon Olam. So the fact that this is talking about going to Israel, Rav Kook lived in Israel, Rav Kook believed in Israel, I thought it would be something good. Plus, I've never taught Rav Kook. So I'm challenging myself. It's going to pull me out. That's why I say I hope you enjoy it, and I hope I enjoy it, because I'm not quite sure yet. It sounds like for me it's a challenge. So we'll get it going, and you guys will have to give me feedback as we go through it. If we're going too slow, too fast, if it's too high, too low, too boring, too exciting, whatever it is. I don't know. I've never done this before. So stay with me, hang with me on this, and give me the honest feedback as we do it. Okay. Shkoyach. Good. Shkoyach to everybody for finishing Em HaBanim Chap3.
Shkoyach.
Put him through the exam.
Yes.
Give you a mark.
Give me a mark.